From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
At this store in Cambridgeshire, it's a race to keep shelves stocked. Sales are up 75%.
Use your common sense. We do serve a lot of elderly and vulnerable people.
Mum and Dad have been serving this community for 3 decades. Their sons have been picking orders for vulnerable customers who can't leave their homes.
Our staff are our number one asset, and we need to try and protect them as much as we possibly can, because whilst it's a different front line, they are on the front line. We're having 20,000 people a week go through our shop at the present time, and my staff are there serving them and looking after them.
Just this incredible spirit of togetherness in terms of customers in stores, and I would say a real turning point of that was lockdown.
It was then that people started to move across and look at other sources of supply, and that very much included the convenience store sector.
We were having to fill that gap in many respects through local sourcing because there were issues with the national supply chains, and that was quite useful, and that really opened our eyes to some of the local producers that perhaps we hadn't worked with before.
And we've heard a lot about the supermarkets, but should not overlook the essential role of local shops, providing an estimated 600,000 home deliveries per week.
More and more they're using us instead of the supermarket. Things like our meat sales, we've seen an 800% increase in that. We do a free home delivery, or we've been doing a call and collect where people can book their shopping, and then when they get to us, ring us, and we literally go out to the curb with their shopping.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
No.
Generally, retailers are just trying to make their stores as welcoming, as inviting a place as possible.
There's lots of signage on the floors and directional arrows indicating social distance, and we've had to make the till areas very secure and safe with screens and again directional arrows to try to get people to go through.
Local shops operate at the heart of our communities and across every type of location: villages, housing estates, petrol forecourts and high streets.
And I just want to put the message out there that everyone should use their local convenience stores going forward, so that these great shops and these great businesses continue to thrive and serve our community.
Welcome everybody to ACS Summit 20. You'll have noticed you're not in the Vox at the NEC in Birmingham, and it's not the 31st of March. For reasons you'll understand, it has been delayed and it's moved to be an online conference, but we're absolutely thrilled with the response we've had from members taking part. There are more people taking part in the summit than we've ever had before. You can't see them, but they're here around the country and joining us online. So thanks very much everyone for putting aside this morning to take part in ACS Summit 20. It's been an extraordinary few months, and we'll reflect on that as I go through my presentation and throughout the rest of the day. But the first thing I wanted to do is reflect on another thing which this year has been remarkable from our point of view. It's our 25th anniversary as the Association of Convenience Stores. And we wanted to celebrate this, and we wanted to do so in a way that really recognised what ACS is. And we're not going to show you a sort of honours board of chairman and chief executives, important though all those people are. We wanted to reflect on, who are the people who really built ACS, whether it's people like Dilip, Dennis and Linda, Ian from McColl's, Joe, retailers who are giving that information, that commitment, that engagement at the front line. And that feeds onto committees, people like Chris, Duncan, Liam from the Co-op, Sean from One Stop. Really the grunt work, the grind, the real effort in turning that view from the front line into things we can take outside the organisation. And of course, no more so than on the board. We've been fortunate to have some wonderful directors over the years: Catherine from BP, Graham from MRH, still Ian from Rontech and many others. And there's this magic ingredient of people who make things happen by communicating through, driving them through. It's Ema and Barry from Spa, Gemma from NICER, Darryl from Weetabix. There's another important ingredient, of course, which is politics. And that's speaking to government parliamentarians like David Hanson, Ruth George. They're out of Parliament. Priti Patel, obviously, has gone on to greater things, former chair of the All-Party Small Shops Group. And we're also really blessed to have the expertise of people who advise us from the membership. Heather from Links Co-op, Hannah from Nestle, Philip the Shirley from Surrey and Bucks Trading Standards on regulation. And our links to academia are really important to us as well, whether it's Sabine from Surrey, Jonathan from Oxford, who we're hearing from later on. And what I wanted to really get across there was that breadth of people. I put, I think, 25 people's faces on screen there. There could be 250, could have been 2,500, 25,000 people over those 25 years. But the point is that ACS is a group of people working together. Some are members, some are experts we consult with, some are people we're trying to influence, but it's bringing that diverse group of people together that it's so powerful for us as an organisation. So the first thing to say really is thank you, whether you're one of the names you featured there or not. Thank you for your engagement and support of ACS over those 25 years. And who would have thought 6 months ago there would be 600,000 deliveries a week coming from convenience stores into people's homes, particularly the homes of vulnerable people? We're delighted to play a part in supporting that, and just delighted to see our sector respond, as we knew we would, to the challenges laid down by this pandemic, getting product to people, sorting that product, delivering that, keeping people safe in store, making links with local charities, local communities, working with their colleagues to keep them safe and to harness all of their community spirit as well. It's been a phenomenal time that really has shown what a wonderful sector we are, and it's a privilege to represent that sector in government. And we found that government is more and more interested in our sector, and we've had phone calls and Zoom calls with all of these people over that time. They're hungry for information about what's been happening in our sector. We've been able to feed that in. And it's really important because going forward, we're going to have to face a policy agenda that actually isn't that different to what it was before, but it's incredibly important. This is rich around obesity, around crime, around the environment. We've had a couple of attempts already since the start of the pandemic to try to liberalise and change the current Sunday trading laws, something we obviously oppose, and some COVID-specific issues around Competition and Markets Authority taking great interest in pricing in store, which again, we've been able to play a part in tackling. Another part of our role, of course, is speaking not just in government, but out in the media. And you'll see myself and Chris talking about everything from Easter eggs to face coverings on telly, a lot on radio, and also across the national media. And that's been a really important part of making that case about how important we are to the communities that we serve. We back that up with obviously lots of resources that we've tried to give to retailers to help them to communicate some of the new challenges to customers about distancing, about face coverings. And a really important thing here about how you support vulnerable customers and carers, and how you make links with local authorities to make them aware of the services that you're providing and the role you're playing in those communities. We've also had to change in terms of how we run events, today being the perfect example, but we've run so many ACS live webinars, COVID debates, our Power Mobility and Convenience conference, and all online, and all bringing people together. That networking still happens online, just as it happens face-to-face, but loads of brilliant insights, whether it's outside experts talking about their specialist areas and bringing new information into the sector, whether it's hearing from retailers about what's happening on the front line. Such a powerful resource. Brought that together with our executive education program, which has had a really successful first year despite the challenges of COVID. Brought it together with information, some of which we're sharing today with our local shop reports, and with other communications, not least our podcast, which has been incredibly popular, incredibly important for this time. So looking back a bit further then, over the last 25 years, and the main thing I want to get across is be very careful of the glib and overarching prophecy about what is going to happen over a period of time. Nobody really knows. And I look back over the last 25 years, things I've heard at conferences and read. First, about this idea of clone towns. Now, there are some clone towns. There is a growth in multiple and single brand retailing. But actually, when I look back at the talk about clone towns, half of these brands that were seen as being part of the sort of identikit high street, half of those brands aren't here anymore either. So a tough time for all sorts of retailers. And actually in our sector, I look back at our local shop report from the first one we did in 2012, the proportion of independent retailers operating convenience stores is exactly the same. There is a future for independent convenience stores and lots of different operators in our sector. We were told that 24-hour opening in convenience stores would be commonplace, would be the norm. 4% of convenience stores are open 24 hours now, and they play a really important role in our sector. But it's not gone that way. It's not been this uniform development that lots of clever consultants were telling us would happen 20 years ago. We've also been told by those same clever people that there'll be very little cash being used in convenience stores. Look at the movement, they say, towards card payments away from cash. That's true, and there is a movement away from or towards card payments in our sector, but still, the majority of payments in our sector are still by cash, even at this time of in the last 6 months, when obviously there's been a lot of movements towards card payments over that time, bigger baskets and so on. Thinking about some of the political challenges, and 20 years ago, 15 years ago, This whole debate about binge drinking, it's the new British disease, said Tony Blair in 2004. And the stats in 2004 suggested that might be true. But since then, the last 20 years, we've seen a significant decline in the number of people drinking in this country. It doesn't mean we don't have problems with alcohol-related disorder, far fewer than we used to have. I put this up because this could be a slide we could show anytime, isn't it? This year's conference, and what is going to happen with self-driving vehicles, clever, smart ways of doing deliveries, really interesting debate. But this quote and this image is from 2013. And do you look outside your window if you're working at home, or look outside your office and see lots of drones going around delivering parcels to your neighbours? No, you don't, do you? Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen into the future, but beware of the prophecy and beware of the notion that these things are automatic and inevitable. So I think in that spirit, I'm not going to make any prophecies for the next 25 years. You may hear some today. I hope you do. It'd be very stimulating. But I am going to talk about some questions for the next 25 years, things we maybe ought to think about. For example, how should we segment our customers over the next 25 years? We tend to do so in terms of old and young, and by male and female and so on. But there are some other splits, some other differences that may be just as important. Home ownership and non-home ownership seems like a real dividing line in society at the moment. People's attitudes to the environment and the degree to which they will make decisions, whether it's veganism, whether it's about their use of packaging and plastic, based on their perception and their view of the future of our planet. What we'll be selling. Yes, we can debate the basket of goods and products that's incredibly important. But what else are we selling? Services like recycling facilities, like upcycling and repairs. You've seen convenience stores opening with bike repair shops attached to them. Banking services, I think, will become incredibly important. Already we've got click and collect and those sorts of services. I think pharmacy will become incredibly important with an ageing population, but with some of those pharmacies in secondary areas probably not continuing, all of them at least, as standalone businesses. Another key question, who will our competitors be over the next 25 years? 15, 20, 25 years ago, everyone talked about Tesco. Tesco were the bogeyman for our sector, the arch competitor. Well, maybe now that's Amazon, perhaps. I think in those terms. Maybe in the future, when we're heading into a time, it might be Just Eat, companies who are trying to provide very convenient delivery options. It'll be none of these people. But the point to me is we need to think about how our competitor base is changing, the people we benchmark against, the people we devise our strategies to compete with. Maybe they're competitors, maybe they're also partners. All of those businesses I put on screen has big parts of their strategy partnering with other businesses, supplying them and working with them. So who will be those competitors that will be coexisting alongside in the future? I've been at ACS not quite 25 years, but nearly. And one of the first conferences I went to, I was talking to an American convenience retailer who was speaking. And he said, James, look at the products in the store. Everyone focuses on those. That's not what we're selling. What we're selling is time. We're selling people the opportunity to get through a store quicker and have that time back in their lives. I think that's as true today as it was then. But there's a different part of that relationship with time. What about the time that people are saving and the way that people want to spend the time with us by us creating an environment where they want to spend time, that interaction they have with people? And it'll be different for different people, but I think we can both sell that time back to people, but also sell them an opportunity to spend that time in a more constructive and rewarding and fulfilling way. What are the right metrics we'll be using as we go forward? You know, we talked about sales per square foot and growth rates and stock turn and margin. All those things will continue to be important, of course. But maybe it's more about some of the key metrics and more about job satisfaction from colleagues in the sector, about our reputation in the community. We're rated as the most important community asset, about our presence online, about the ratings we get, about our followers, and about the support we get, the posts and the work that we do online. Maybe they will become the more relevant metrics going forward. So that presents some questions that we'll start to address today. Who are our colleagues of the future? Are we really food retailers? I think 6 months ago we might have suggested, are we, the question, maybe we're not. Well, I think now we probably feel like we are more food retailers, but are we really food retailers? We go into a new normal. Are people going to be feeding their families from our stores moving forward? And has COVID actually changed anything? Are we talking about just accelerating some trends and changes, or are we talking about some profound long-term changes that this will, we won't go back to where we were before? Some really important questions to address. And we've got 3 sessions in this conference where we'll be doing that. In our last session today, we're hearing from 3 experts on what has happened during COVID and what it means for our sector. Rebecca, Jonathan, Michaela, all written reports we've commissioned, and will be sharing their expertise. Then launching our local shop report with Chris and his panel. It's a fantastic local shop report this year. I'm delighted to bring that into Summit this year. But the first session is going to be looking at the questions I asked there about people, about food, and about convenience. We're hearing from Nikki Rogers from F. Blakemore, from Johnny McQuarrie from One Stop. But our first presenter will be Matthew Taylor, He's Chief Executive of the Royal Society for the Arts, but we particularly asked him because he's done a lot of work in recent years with the government on the future of work, on good work, and in particular what that means in terms of retail. So we're absolutely thrilled to have Matthew presenting for us today. Matthew, welcome to Summit.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to you. I'm going to talk about where I think things were before the COVID crisis. I'm going to say something about what I think may have changed during that crisis, and then end up by talking about kinds of choices I think you have and that we all have in this kind of, well, hopefully post-COVID world. So let's start with where we were before we'd ever heard of coronavirus. The first thing to say is that we had a very tight labour market. In fact, we achieved last year the highest ever employment rate in the UK. And that's kind of interesting because there's lots of speculation about the impact of technology on jobs, and over the years, as technology has changed, various people have predicted a kind of world of massive unemployment. But yet, despite those kind of past predictions and the impact of technology, now there we are with our highest ever employment rate. And as a consequence of that, partly, we were starting to see some signs of improving wage levels, partly driven by the increase in the minimum wage. And it's worth noting that the government is still formally committed to the minimum wage rising over the next 5 years to the point at which there is essentially no poverty pay, because it will rise to 2/3 of median earnings, which is the poverty threshold. So some signs after this a long period of stagnancy in wages, in real wages, some signs of improvement, but still quite a large level of in-work poverty, because even if you have one income coming into the house, if you've got more than one adult there, you've got children there, you might still be in poverty. And then the other aspect of the kind of world before COVID was a set of kind of long-term concerns. And of those, I think I would pick out 2 or 3 concerns around skills and productivity. As we know, it takes British workers on average 5 days to produce what it takes German workers 4 days to produce. We have poor skill levels in this country. That's not just about people coming through the education system, but it's also about people in the workforce at the moment. Also, lots of discussion about technology and lots of predictions about the impact of technology. If I had more time, I'd offer you a critique of technological determinism, but nevertheless, lots of books, lots of articles about the way in which AI and robotics are going to impact work. And yet again, as we've seen through history, people emerging who predict either on the one hand, massive unemployment and social division and unrest, and on the other hand, a kind of paradise in which we can work for a couple of hours in the morning and then read Plato, play the guitar, and do pottery for the rest of our time. And all those predictions will continue. My own view is that there is no inherent reason why technological change is going to lead to fewer or more jobs. That's to do with the choices that we make. But still lots of kind of conversation about technology. And then third, kind of particular issues around shortages of people, partly related, of course, to the impact of Brexit and the loss of lower skilled Eastern European workers in particular, but also about particular areas where there are worries about shortages, the most obvious being care, where we're going to need hundreds of thousands of new care workers over the next few years. So those were the kinds of issues that were around. But there was also something else going on, and that was the emergence of a good work agenda. I'm kind of quite proud of the fact that I can say a good work agenda, because that phrase, that idea of good work, was one that I put at the heart of a report that I produced for Theresa May a few years ago. It was indeed called Good Work. And in that report, what I had tried to do was to reflect public concerns about inequality in work, about precarious work, and the growth of gig work. And what I tried to argue was that public policy has primarily been concerned in the past with the number of jobs. I worked in government, worked for the Tony Blair government, and there all we really cared about was getting people into work. And had I mentioned, and a couple of times I did because I've always been interested in this stuff, well, what about the quality of work? There was kind of view which was, well, I haven't got time for that, because what really matters is the amount of work there is. And we'd seen a bit of a change in that, partly because of that tight labour market, partly because people weren't worried about unemployment anymore, and I'll come back to that. But also, as I said, because of people's concerns about precarious work, in-work poverty, and the emergence of new forms of work like gig work. So what do we mean by good work? Well, the RSA, the organisation I run, which does a lot of research and development and engagement around the future of work, we did a piece of work with the Carnegie Trust, a foundation a few years ago, around how you would measure good work. And based on academic research and surveys of people themselves, we identified 7 components of good work. So they are, firstly, terms of employment, including job security and guaranteed hours. Are people kind of the basic contract of work? Is that good? Is that what people want? Secondly, pay and benefits. And it's important to say here, it's not just the level of pay, but it's a sense that pay is fair. So actually people on reasonably high pay can feel dissatisfied if they think pay is unfair, and people on lower pay can feel okay with it if they think that there is fairness to the pay system. Thirdly, health, safety, and what's called psychosocial well-being. And this is obviously an issue that's really moved up the agenda as a consequence both of the kind of physical issues around coronavirus and the work that we have to undertake, and who knows how long it will last to ensure that people are safe, but also the impact that that's had on people's well-being, and lots of conversation about what impact working from home has on people. So, and also the biggest individual source now of people taking time off work for illness is to do with mental well-being. Fourth area is job design. Job design and the nature of work, the use of skills, level of control, sense of purpose. So that's in a sense, does your job feel like a job that, uses your skills, a job where you can make some choices, where it feels as though what you're doing is worthwhile. And, we're thinking of that idea, you might recall, some of you, that a few years ago, a guy called David Graeber, who's a very radical anthropologist at LSE, he wrote a blog called Bullshit Jobs, and he argued in that many people feel that the jobs they do are of no value or use to anybody at all. And this wasn't people working in kind of warehouses. This was kind of corporate lawyers and people like that. And I think one of our polling companies, YouGov, I think, did a poll of that and found that two-thirds of people said that they felt that part or all of their job was pretty pointless. So that's a very important thing. If you're spending 8 hours a day doing something, you want to feel it's got purpose, and you want to feel that you have got some kind of influence over what happens. The fifth factor is social support and cohesion, and that's both from colleagues and from managers. So do you feel you're part of the team? Do people support you? That's obviously incredibly important, and some recent surveys have suggested that's probably the single most important determinant of whether people like their jobs is, do they feel they're part of the team? Do they feel they've got supportive managers? The sixth factor is voice and representation. Do people feel that they have some rights at work, that they can have their voice heard, that there's somebody to represent their views? And this is important because it gives people a sense that if something goes wrong, there's someone that they can turn to. And then finally, and you might be surprised it's taken me so long to get to this final seventh factor, is work-life balance. And of course, we've had lots of conversation about that because of the way in which our working patterns have changed during the pandemic. Now, this focus on good work, which has grown up over the last few years, and not just in Britain, but in other parts of the world, was leading to some change. So the government implemented some of the reforms, which I argued for in my report, and they're formally committed to implementing most of them. We're waiting still for the publication of an employment bill, which has been promised by the government. It's held up in the kind of same COVID, Brexit position that an awful lot of government action is focused on at the moment, but we're hoping that we will see an employment bill, which will include, amongst other things, creating a new enforcement body and doing something around the issue of employment status. So that's where we were. Those are the kinds of issues: tight labour market, a set of long-term concerns, public worries about kind of bad work, precarious work, some signs of the good work agenda growing. So how has that been affected by what's happened during COVID and where we are now? Well, on the one hand, I would say that actually those concerns, people's worries about bad work, a kind of public intolerance of bad work, I'd say that's probably grown. I'd say that we became acutely aware early on in the crisis about kind of precarious work, because the people who weren't going to be captured by the furlough scheme, for example, because they were on short-term contracts or because they were self-employed, agency workers or whatever. So that's heightened people's concern about the fact that there's a whole group of people who don't seem to be fully covered by regulations and the welfare system. Secondly, a really major kind of public consciousness raising about the importance of key workers. And of course, key workers aren't just nurses and doctors, but they are the people who've been delivering parcels to your door, working in the local shops, the people who kept things working, the people who went into work despite the risks that were involved. And I think what that's really highlighted is a kind of egalitarian sense of the disconnect between people's market value and their social value. And I think that probably contributes to a sense of more fairness, because people are saying, well, why is it these people we rely upon, whether they're care workers in care homes or people serving me in my local supermarket, why are these people viewed with why do they have low status? Why do they have low pay when they're so important? And let's think about them in comparison to, I don't know, corporate lawyers and bankers. And also more recently, we've seen a focus on enforcement, people's concern about whether the rules are being obeyed. And we saw that particularly in Leicester, in the garment sector. And that was kind of interesting. Those issues have been going on for many years, but they really rose to prominence, partly because of the COVID issue, that people were worried about health and safety in those factories. But again, I think it reflected kind of public intolerance, and a lot of journalists went to Leicester. There was a big focus. And I think there is now some change taking place. The question is whether or not it slips back. But I think that strengthened the public's view that the rules must be properly implemented. So that all suggests the good work agenda is going to grow and develop and deepen. But of course, there is another factor coming from the other direction. And that is that we are likely to be back into an era of higher unemployment. Now, nobody knows how long this will last. So there are two big imponderables, or three. How much will unemployment rise? How long will we be in a period where unemployment is high? And then thirdly, what are the structural changes that are taking place underneath this kind of cyclical change? Because whilst COVID isn't a typical cycle, in a way it is a cycle because things get worse, but they're going to get better. Underneath that, will there be structural changes? So some people believe that there will be an acceleration in automation because, as Adair Turner, former head of the CBI, put it rather pithily at the beginning of the crisis, robots don't get sick. So it could be that what we see is that we see a cyclical shift. Unemployment rises, it starts to fall as COVID moves out of the system, things start to return to normal. But then what is revealed is a structural shift that's taken place underneath that, which has changed the nature of our labour market. And certainly if I was in Whitehall right now, I guess if I was in meetings talking about jobs and I was to talk about quality of work, I'd be told, hold on, that is not the priority. The priority is getting people into work. Any job is better than no job. So where does that leave us now? Well, I think it leaves us with a really simple but challenging task, and that is to show that there is no conflict between more work and good work. And that's the argument that I'm focused on, both in my role running the RSA and the work we do on the future of work and on good work, but also in my role for government as head of labour market enforcement, to try to demonstrate that the urgent need to create enough jobs should not be set against the importance of making sure we have fairness and dignity, and that we try as far as possible to ensure that every job meets those 7 criteria for good work that I described earlier. So what does that mean for you? Well, I'm not an expert on your sector, and I understand that you, like any other people involved in business now, face an incredibly complex, fast-changing situation. But nevertheless, I can't help feeling that you probably have a choice. On the one hand, there was, even before this crisis, and in my view, a slightly worrying conversation within the retail sector, which was kind of around, well, how can we take gig work? How can we take the kind of Uber and Deliveroo model, and how can we bring it into the retail sector? You know, we know that there are times when shops are busier or less busy. Why have we got people, you know, working shifts that might last 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever, when, you know, our footfall changes? You know, maybe we could use the same model. Maybe we can have people sitting around the corner having a coffee and we just pull them in for an hour here or an hour there, a kind of gig work, piecework model. And I even saw platforms emerging which were offering this kind of model to the retail sector. And in my view, in so doing, we're breaking the law, because they were characterizing these workers as self-employed gig workers. And in my view, if you work in almost any retail environment where you're told what to do and you're managed, that is not and should not be described as self-employment. And that issue, I haven't got time to get into it, but that's one of the issues the government needs to look at when it thinks of this question of employment status. And my bet would be that the government is going to tighten up the rules, and so make it harder for some of those platform companies to portray their workers as self-employed and actually insist that they are treated as employees, partly to give them rights and partly because the government is worried about the amount of revenue it loses, because of course employers don't pay national insurance on self-employed labour, they do only pay it on employed labour. So anyway, there's one kind of option, which is this kind of gig work, piecework option, which I think would be retrograde. I don't think the public would like it, and I'm not sure I think government would try to bear down on it. Or the alternative is a more kind of, how would I put it, a kind of more colleague-driven approach. One which focuses on those factors of good work. One that says that, you know, even though it may never be that the average person working in a convenience store is going to be highly paid or highly skilled, that doesn't mean that their work can't be dignified work. It doesn't mean that they can't develop skills, even transferable skills, in that work. So my advice to you is to take the high road, is to see your workers as colleagues and partners, to try to provide good work. And I want to say, this is my final point, that whilst I think you should do that for ethical reasons, and in a sense small p, political reasons, because I think if you go down a different route, if you go down the route of casualizing your workforce, you may well face quite a big kind of backlash from the public and from politicians. But whilst I want to argue that on ethical grounds, I also want to suggest to you that there is a self-interested reason, or an enlightened self-interested reason for that. I think that one of the challenges around good work is the notion that there is a conflict of interest between consumers and producers. And I think that that sense of a conflict of interest is particularly acute when it comes to people buying things over the internet, for the simple reason that what the internet does is it drives you towards price. And when people go on, they look for the cheapest goods, and generally speaking, don't give consideration to whether or not the thing they're buying is produced in an ethical or reasonable way. So in a sense, the internet is a very kind of consumer price fixated kind of mechanism. Whereas I think when people go to local shops, when they go to them in person, that kind of conflict between consumers and producers doesn't feel that way, because it kind of feels that we're all members of the local community. And there is a sense that the consumption choices I make have got implications for people I can see and I can talk to. And I think that that notion that we need a good balance between our priorities as consumers and our priorities as producers, because most of us are both these things, is really important. And I'll give you a tiny example I just saw yesterday, which is James Timpson, who's a bit of a hero of mine. He sent out a tweet, and he said in his tweet to his customers, "I'm sorry if you don't get quite the level of service you're used to in my shops today, but that's because I like to give my staff time off to take their children to school on the first day of term. And of course, it's a particularly important first day of term." I thought, what a wonderful idea. And I thought there is not a single Timpson's customer who will read that who won't actually feel warmer towards that organisation, even if they have to queue up for 10 more minutes to get their keys cut or wherever it might be. You know, and this is my experience. I'll end with this. During lockdown, you know, I would walk down to my local co-op and, you know, as I've always done. And, you know, I like to think I'm a kind of reasonably nice, reasonably polite person, but something changed for me in that experience. You know, meeting members of staff who in the early days in particular were really taking risks to work in those stores. When I bought whatever I bought off them, I got my little kind of basket of goods or whatever, I said thank you to them. I looked them in the eye and I said thank you for your work. You know, and I could see that that was important to them to be appreciated. And you know, that experience, going out, being nice to somebody, getting to know them so they now say hello to me and we maybe have a little chat, that is the thing that makes face-to-face shopping different from just going online at midnight and seeing what Amazon's cheapest offer might be. That is the value added we need to get to. So I believe that if we want people to shop face-to-face, to use their local shops, we need to make it a different experience. I think to make it a different experience, we need to say that actually consumers and producers share something. They share the desire for ethical business to be done in the right way. And that therefore, for you to commit to the high road, to see your workers as colleagues and partners and to resist the temptation, despite the economic pressures, to go down the kind of low road of casualization, that this is the right thing to do for society, the right thing to do ethically, but also the right thing to do for your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Fantastically interesting presentation. We've had many conversations over the years about the future of work, and that really brought that to life. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion where we can build on some of those points. And the next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce Nikki Rogers. She is Food Solutions Director at AF Blakemore. She's formerly worked with BP, where we first got to know Nikki, and as anyone who knows about food in the convenience sector, it's Nikki. So we're absolutely delighted to have her with us. So please give a very warm welcome to Nikki Rogers.
Hi everybody, I'm Nikki Rogers and I'm from AF Blakemore, and I'm here today to talk to you just a little bit about range development in the new normal and what might have changed as a result of COVID and how we're looking to approach our range development within AF Blakemore. I think the first thing to say actually is that the core principles of range development haven't actually changed at all. COVID has changed the world in immeasurable ways, but the core principles of range development remain unchanged. And the key thing that I would say that you have to do is understand your customers. So who are they? Who are your customers? Have they changed since lockdown? Are you getting new customers? Have you lost customers? And crucially, what are their shopping needs today versus what were their shopping needs 6 months ago? It's very easy to get hung up on the fact that 6 months ago stores were trading in a particular way, but I'd be really surprised if any store was trading in the same way today. And then you need to understand how they're shopping your stores. So, and by that, what I mean is, are they coming on foot? Are they coming in a car? What does their basket size look like? Are they shopping in person? Are they sending in a relative? And also, perhaps they've moved to online as well. So once you understand who your customers are, what their needs are, how they're shopping your stores, then, and only then, should you be looking to tailor your range, your price, and your promotions to meet the specific needs of your customer groups in each of your different store types. So those principles haven't changed at all. They've always been the core principles of range development. But there is a watch out, unsurprisingly, the one thing that has caught everybody out, or potentially caught people out, is the unprecedented level of change in shopper behaviour. I'm sure you are just as inundated with data as I am. And COVID has made people's behaviour change in unprecedented ways. So ingrained behaviour that previously may have taken 2 to 3 years to change is now changing in the matter of weeks. You know, it can take 6 to 12 weeks now to change customer behaviour. And the graphs that you see on the screen in front of you now just basically reference the fact that customers are now shopping C stores, which is what we all know. So they're moving away from the discounters and the supermarkets, and we've seen unprecedented change. They're shopping in discount, well, they're not shopping in discounters anymore, sorry. they're shopping in C stores, and they're shopping online. And critically, we are also seeing, even within the C-store environment, certainly in AF Blakemore, that shoppers are making fewer trips, so they are coming less frequently, but their basket spend is significantly up. And one of the key things that we've seen around behaviour change in Blakemore is the importance of value. So value has always been important. But in a world where we don't know, what's going to happen in terms of the economy, we're already staring down the barrel of one of the biggest recessions we've ever seen, we know that value matters more than ever, and it's increasingly important. And it's something that we've really, really focused on at Blakemore since the very, very early days of lockdown. But one of the things that we've been really keen to understand is what drives value perception. And we believe that it's actually just more than price. Sorry, it is more than price. If you just get the price right, you can tick one of the boxes, but that's not going to significantly change your consumers' perception of how much value you are offering them. And so we believe value is derived of these 5 things. You have to get your base price right. You have to have a good promotional mix. If you can have an own label brand that you're really proud of, then that will help. Getting the assortment right is key. And crucially, getting the in-store and online experience right is more important than anybody could have possibly foreseen. So if you can get those 5 things right, then you can drive value perception. And so I want to talk a little bit now about what we've done at AF Blakemore around each of those 5 pillars. So the first one is around base price. Now, very early on in lockdown, we noticed and realised that we were acquiring new customers who had never before set foot in a Spar store. And we wanted to make sure that when the world returned to normal and you didn't have to queue for 30 minutes in the rain to get into a supermarket, that we did everything we could to retain those new customers. So in early May, we reduced the price of 180 KVI lines, and we really, really shouted about it. So what you can see on the screen is the pause that we put in place in stores. These lines are still live. This is an ongoing programme. It's not just for lockdown. And we believe that by driving value credentials on the everyday basics, that we will retain more customers when the world goes back to completely normal. This has been running for about 12 weeks now. And we're now starting to see the benefits come through, and we're starting to see the KVI lines outperform the rest of the store. The other thing that we've really focused on, the second pillar around value, is around promotions. So obviously early on in lockdown, lots of promotions got pulled, suppliers weren't supporting them, we couldn't guarantee availability. But when promotions did become available again, as well as just launching the standard convenience store promotions, we really wanted to help our customers and make sure that we were offering them a complete solution. One of the key pieces of insight that we got was that despite the fact that people were at home more than they've ever been, they were actually more time pressed than they realised. So the pressures of balancing homeschooling, working from home, caring for sick relatives meant that whilst people wanted to scratch cook, they were actually finding it really difficult. So what we wanted to do was make things as easy as possible for them. And that's where our Tonight's Tea meal deal came from. People are normally quite familiar with a food to go meal deal. We basically applied the same principles to Tonight's Tea. So you can get everything that you needed to get for your Tonight's Tea with a number of core traditional meals, all for £5. And we replicated that across fresh and frozen to make sure that we were giving all of our customers the options to buy into a meal deal, which made their lives a bit easier, helped them with value, and helped drive our promotional credentials. The other thing linked into promotions that I want to talk about is own label and how that can also play into promotions. We noticed very early on in lockdown that our penetration of Spar own label had grown significantly. So more and more people were buying into our own label products. And we are rightly very proud of our Spar own label. And we genuinely believe that if we can get the Spar own label products into more customers' baskets, then we will retain more customers in the long run. And one of the things that we've done is we've been looking at how we can more actively and more aggressively promote own label, not only to drive our value credentials, but also to get the Spar product into more customers' homes. And one of the things that we've been really proud about is this buy one, get one for a penny scheme. Now, I haven't got any data as to how this has worked because actually it launches next week, but it's the first time we've ever done anything like this. So the consumers will be able to come in, they'll be able to get buy one, get one for a penny across a huge range of SPAR own label products. And the aim of this promotion, as I've said, is to drive own label penetration, to get it into more baskets, because we are absolutely of the belief that if we can get own label into more customers' baskets, that we will improve our customer retention over time. And everything that we're doing through this period is about ensuring that when the world returns to normal, that our performance remains relatively consistent and doesn't just drop off a cliff. The fourth pillar around value that I want to just reference now is around assortment. Getting the right assortment has always been critical, and in COVID times, it's never been more essential. So as more and more consumers are using C-stores now for their evening meal solution, rather than just a top-up, making sure that you've got the right assortment to satisfy those needs is absolutely crucial. And we know through research and through analysis that if you can capture the protein element of the meal, then you're more than likely going to capture 80% of the rest of the plate. And that's what we've been looking at throughout the lockdown period to try and identify how we can capture the middle of the plate so we capture the whole of the plate. And about 4 weeks ago, we launched our incredibly exciting County Bridge fresh meat range, which is a value proposition. So it's designed to hit a price point, but it also gives the consumers the opportunity to buy a wide variety of proteins. And we've seen meat sales quadruple in the stores where we've put this range in. And also, crucially, what we've seen is the halo effect across the rest of the stores. This isn't a deal or a promotion to drive just fresh meat. It's about driving footfall into our stores and giving customers the opportunity to buy their entire evening meal in one location. And so we are really, really keen and really focused on driving fresh participation across all of our store types. And linked into fresh participation, obviously, is food to go. Now, I'm sure there's nobody on this call at the moment that didn't suffer the same way that we did at the beginning of lockdown when food to go just died. You know, nobody was buying food to go for reasons we all understand. And food to go was an incredibly important part of our range, and still is an important part of our range, because it drives sales and, crucially, margin. And we identified very early on that if we wanted to come back fighting within the food to go area, we needed to be ready to respond when people did go back to the office, when people started to go back to work, when people were looking for food to go options. And so throughout lockdown, we've been developing a fantastic new range for our SPAR branded in-store daily deli. And we will be launching that actually in about 3 or 4 weeks. And so probably before the world's gone back to normal, but we've also identified that most of our consumer base is actually quite lunch weary at the moment. Certainly people who've been at home for 6 months are getting a bit tired of making their own lunch. If you've had your kids at home as well, trying to work out what they're going to eat has been a nightmare. It certainly has for me. So we've been really focused on this new mission, or the emerging mission, of sort of food to go at home. So even if the offices don't go back to normal, even if people are still working from home, we are confident that there's an opportunity for us to maximise food to go and to entice people who are still working from home to eat food to go. So our new daily deli range launches in October, and it's focused on all of the key elements that you'd expect an in-store food to go offer to be focused on. Hot and cold breakfasts, hot and cold breakfast, sandwiches, baguettes, wraps, meal pots, hot, cold, lunchtime, evening time, all of the key missions are there. And then what you can see on the right-hand side there is a fantastic opportunity that we've also identified, and one I'd encourage everybody to think about, is what other opportunities do we have, or you have, for food to go. So we're launching a food to go brand across our non-SPAR customers as well. Our SPAR customers will have daily deli, and our non-SPAR customers who can't take daily deli, we've created the Chow Chow brand. So this is a really exciting opportunity to grow food food to go outside of the Spar network. And we'll be launching a range of sandwiches, of pre-packed sandwiches, baguettes, salads, snack pots, under the Chow Chow brand in October. And the final thing I want to mention about assortment is the need to respond to new missions and opportunities. I've been in trading for most of my professional career, and I've got to be honest that never in a million years would I have said that PPE would be a key category within a convenience store. But what you can see on the right-hand side there in that red stand is a dedicated FSDU given over entirely just to PPE. And the reason I put that there is because I think trends are going to change more quickly than we've ever experienced before. We believe that PPE is certainly going to be here for the midterm, at least for the next 6 to 12 months, could be even longer, but there could also be something new that comes around the corner that there's not even on our radar today, and we have to be able to respond to those. The big picture that you can see in the middle with bulk stacks of multi-pack sweets is an opportunity that one of our fantastic traders identified when the airports went into lockdown or when the airports closed. There's obviously a lot of redundant stock. Those great big bags of sweets that you tend to buy only ever in an airport were suddenly available at a great price. And so we acted on that opportunity, and we've got those products into our stores, and it's helped bolster our confectionery sales at a time when most people were seeing confectionery sales decline. So it's absolutely essential that you are ready and able to respond to new missions and new opportunities. The final element around value that I just want to reference is experience. Now, I'm talking here about online, but of course the experience in store is important as well. But online is absolutely here to stay. It's something that's going to continue to grow. The market looks like it's going to grow at 25% this year. Previously, that was predicted to be at 8%, and the level of growth is expected to continue. And we've done some research that says that actually 70% of the consumers that we researched with said that they would like to use a C-store for deliveries. However, less than 50% of them knew that platforms existed that allowed them to do that. So we partnered with Snappy Shopper, and we're really pleased with the way that partnership is working. Snappy Shopper is available as an online delivery solution in a large number of our stores, and we've had great feedback from customers who've been using it. There've been a number of learnings actually, but one of the biggest learnings that I'd share with you at this point is getting the range and the promotional structure right online is equally as important as it is about getting it right in store. When we first launched Snappy Shopper, it wasn't quite right, and we had some negative feedback from customers around the fact that they couldn't get access to promotions that they could in stores. So we have addressed that, and now the Snappy Shopper platform mirrors very closely what you will see in most of our stores. So online is absolutely here to stay. And those are the 5 key pillars, if you like, that we are using to drive our range development processes. It's around making sure we've got the right base price, making sure we've got the right promotional structure, that we've got a fantastic own label offer, that our assortment is right, and that the experience in store and online is right. All of those things were relevant pre-COVID. They're probably just more relevant now. And the final thing that I did want to reference is around health and wellness. So health and wellness has always been a trend, and traditionally it's been something that people focus on in January. January is mentioned a lot, and people talk about having hero products that you can reference in January as part of that. And what you can see on the right hand side there is just the number of people signing up to the Vegan Society year on year. So it is growing. It's absolutely a huge trend. And I'm sure a lot of you will have seen the announcement a few weeks ago that actually here at AF Blakemore, we've just acquired the fabulous vegan store. And we're really excited about that because we believe that this is a huge opportunity for our retail stores and our wholesale customers to buy into the health and wellness trend. We are firmly of the belief that health and wellness, and sort of linked into that would be veganism, is a trend that's going to grow and grow. COVID has brought a huge amount of change, and it's made people much more aware of their physical well-being, and health and wellness is going to continue to be important for us. And we will be using the vegan store products to supplement standard ranges within our stores and offering them to our wholesale customers. We'll also be looking to bring in dedicated promotions, and we're looking to make sure that each month or each period we have an eye on health and wellness to make sure that our promotional strategy references that as well. So to summarise, what lessons have we learned at Blakemores during lockdown? If I was truthful, there's pages and pages and pages of these, and we have done lots of things that didn't go quite as planned. But the key things that I would leave you with and encourage you to really try and understand. First of all, understand your customers. Make sure you understand who your customers are today, not who they were 6 months ago. And crucially, make sure you understand who they're likely to be tomorrow, because behaviours are changing at an unprecedented level. The second thing is be nimble. Because behaviours are changing so rapidly, we haven't got months and months to make decisions. We have to act quickly. We have to respond to changing needs and to changing circumstances, and we have to be nimble. And the final thing that I'd leave you with is a kind of a bit of a resilience message, if you like. Not everything that you try will work. And that's always been true, but in an environment where we're being nimble and we're responding to things perhaps more quickly than we would have done previously, all I would say to you is be prepared to fail fast, learn and move on. And if you can do all of those things and you can capture the value proposition, then you will have every opportunity to have the right range for your customers going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Fantastic presentation, as always. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion on that a little bit further. But final speaker in this session, delighted to welcome Johnny McQuarrie, who's Managing Director of One Stop Stores, and he'll be able to share with us some reflections on what's happened over the last few months in the sector and what it means for the business. Welcome, Johnny.
Good morning. I'm Johnny, and I look after the One Stop and Jack's business for Tesco. I've worked for Tesco for nearly 2 decades, and it's a privilege to be here today to talk to you at the ACS Summit. One of the main reasons why is because actually I'm a 4th generation convenience retailer in the McQuarrie family. My uncle, my grandmother and my great-grandfather were all convenience retailers in a small town in Renfrewshire just outside Glasgow. So for over the last 80 years, we've been retailing through our family. I'd also like to thank James and the ACS team for the opportunity to speak today, and thank James and the ACS team for the brilliant work they've done in giving the entire convenience market direction on dealing with COVID and the pandemic regulations, so thank you. So what's changed? Well, a lot's changed, but on the 23rd of March, the Prime Minister put the entire country into lockdown. It was something that was completely untested and something we'd never dealt before. Now, many of us in retail have dealt with floods, some fires, some burglaries, and actually even, for me personally, and many retailers who maybe had to deal with some of the London riot impacts that we had in 2011. That was probably the biggest things we dealt with. But when we were dealing with this, it was uncharted territory. We'd never seen anything like it. Complete closure of UK businesses. And more importantly, the surrealness at 5 o'clock at night, all the teams across the UK and most businesses watching the Prime Minister deliver a speech that then we had to then go on calls and talk to our businesses about what changes were happening and then implement them the next day. And then go back on a call at 5 o'clock at night and watch the Prime Minister again. And so on and so forth for so many days. Convenience had to be as agile most point ever, because actually the changes we had to implement 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours was constant for the first 4 or 5, 6 weeks as we all learned how to deal with the pandemic and serve our colleagues and customers. But the 2 key points that I wanted to talk about that I saw come out of that was, number one, trust is at a 7-year high in UK food retail. But within that, the kudos that our colleagues got in every single shop that serves food was well deserved and well timed. And it's about time our colleagues got that kudos. Our colleagues have been the fabric of communities for decades, And actually, they showed how important they are to communities, and they showed how important they were to feeding the nation. So well done our teams across retail in the UK, and well deserved. But actually, the other point we saw was the majority of customers found it so much easier to use convenience shops and came across some of them for the first time and loved the range and loved the promotions and loved the service. So that was a real difference as well. So when the spotlight was shone on convenience across the UK to help customers, it stepped forward and delivered brilliantly, in my opinion, on every single local shop in the UK. And what did that bring us? Well, actually, 50% of all UK retail customers visited small shops. That's quite unusual. We normally don't get that amount. And actually within that, 51% of those customers are saying they're coming back, and they're coming back on a more regular basis. So that's newfound customers. But the real change we found was where we were traditionally top-up shops, we become more main shops. Customers, and personally in our business, where we've got shops of maybe an average of 3 or 4 items, smaller baskets, some of those baskets and items doubled, tripled, and some quadrupled. We had some shops that sit in isolated towns, that is the only shop. And it was amazing the trade that went through that shop, and it was humbling to see the way that the teams dealt with customers across the UK. So we had more customers, more footfall, and those customers are telling us they're going to return, which is good for our convenience business. And what does that actually mean? Well, that actually means, looking at it, that the UK convenience market, which we expected growth anyway this year, is going to grow at nearly £2 billion stronger than predicted. That's a lot of trade that's going through our shops. And hopefully in the slides in this presentation, I'll give you some insight also into how One Stop is trying to hold on to some of that business in New Custom. So how did we have to respond as an entire industry? Well, first and foremost, safety and cleanliness became priority. Now, cleanliness, as we know, as retailers, has always been priority. It's just a given. Customers expect clean shops. But safety was something new. PPE, hand sanitizer, distancing stickers in the shop, screens at the checkouts, new cleaning routines. And customers voted with their feet. If they felt that colleagues weren't protected and a shop wasn't protecting them, customers went elsewhere. And we saw that across the markets, where we saw shifting patterns of customers' habits. They went where they felt safe. So it became a clear priority. And then actually, convenience became far more planned. Customers were asked by the government to only go into shops once, maybe twice a week. So they came into far bigger shopping lists, far bigger expectation for our shelves. So we had to react to that and help customers do a planned shop in their day-to-day lives. But what that did bring was small basket fulfillment, which has always existed in convenience across the UK, but it accelerated. We had offline businesses going online. Some of it was done the old-fashioned way, using vans, using bikes, and using on foot. And actually some of the more tech way, leaning into some of the companies like Just Eat, Deliveroo, or Snappy Shopper. And that actually helped service our customers who were isolated, who couldn't get to shops. And then nights in. When the pubs and restaurants and the takeaways closed, customers used local shops to fulfill family occasions, barbecue occasions, and families sat down, and in some households, probably for the first time in a long time, to have some good quality family meals. Now that pubs, restaurants and takeaways are all back open again, actually, we're still seeing continued trade. And I believe that nights in and convenience are here to stay, because the convenience business across the UK delivered brilliantly to those customers. And the inspiration it gave those customers will still fulfill the family. So it's good news. And then lastly, supply chain. All businesses had to be really fleet of foot to get stock in through different ways, different ranges, different brands, because our shops took a real impact in the panic buying, and we had to rebuild our stock reserves quickly. So being agile was a key point in that. So that's probably just 5 of the key areas that the entire industry had to respond in, and responded really well. And how did One Stop respond? Well, first and foremost, the question I'm often asked about is, what was our goal through the whole pandemic? It's never changed. Protection of our colleagues and protection of our franchisees. Simple as that, and it still is the same. And once we see our time through this pandemic and we get out the back end of it, it will still be the same. And if our colleagues and franchisees feedback they felt protected, they felt safe in our shops, then we know we did best as a business to protect our colleagues and our franchisees, because ultimately that's what protects our customers and our communities. And as I said before, customers vote with their feet. Businesses that put the effort into colleagues, franchisees, safety, will see that benefit with customers. And then in the middle, tip of the spear. Tip of the spear is a terminology we use in One Stop, and it's quite simply, tip of the spear is the best performing departments you have. Some of them are best performing volume departments, some are based on profit, and some of them are actually based on what it does for your brand. We always look at the tip of the spear and always understand every quarter. How good is it? Is it maintained? Is it ahead? Can we do anything better on it? Is it protected? Because often the best parts of your business you probably don't give a good MOT and a good service to. So we wanted to do that. We decided to do some work on it, and we secured some more DC space, and we secured more products and different range of products. Just being prepared. And that preparation helped us, and especially helped us with our customer needs. Customer told us they wanted different meals and different meal solutions. So we brought in Indian meals for 2, Indian meals for 4, Chinese meals for 2, pizza deals. We changed our BWS range, our wine range. We brought in more premium beers. We helped customers get products to their home. That was just some of the points of evolving to customers' needs. But more importantly, agility, the great agility that all convenience shops in the UK have, and was shown as at its best. And I just wanted to share these 3 simple bullet points, which always just, when I look back, amaze me. When we had to put screens in our shop, we put 3,000 screens within 10 days. I remember signing off the screens with 2 colleagues on the Wednesday, in production the Thursday, delivered to shops on the Wednesday. Quite amazing. 20,000 litres of hand sanitizer and 250,000 face masks within days. But the biggest one for me was when we had to tell our colleagues that the government was asking us to isolate vulnerable colleagues. We had nearly 2,000 team members who we had to ask to go home. We then recruited nearly 2,000 new colleagues into our business in temporary contracts within 7 days. Not one of them applied online. Every one of them was recruited through word of mouth by the manager and the colleagues, talking to family and friends and people who needed jobs in the community. Local businesses do that seamlessly, and that happened across the full UK in most convenience businesses. And then 4 key areas which I think really helped our business serve customers and serve colleagues. Number 1 was gold. What does gold mean? Gold is a system we operate in crisis. It's actually taken from the police and the army. Gold, silver, bronze. And gold is a tier of the leadership team in one stop. AM, PM calls, adjusting to the regulations from the government, adjusting to customer and colleague needs, adjusting to supply chain needs. Then it filters to silver and bronze. And that continuation and business continuity gave us great seamless continuity in our business. Our business ran smooth as it could. It ran smooth as it could through the panic buying and then the recovery. And it kept the entire business in tune with what we were doing. But then communication, to customer very important, but to colleague vital to colleague. Every single day, great communication and honesty to say, we'll ask you to go left and right, and we're going to ask you to go left and right again. Just bear with us because we're learning. And it's humbling to see your colleagues' attitude when they just got on with it and serve customers. Our third-party support through Booker, Greencore and Menzies to help us get some volume pressure out of the business was phenomenal. Booker, Greencore and Menzies really helped us. And then lastly, probably the unsung heroes, supply chain and DC. If your supply chain and DC aren't in harmony, then do you know what? You tip your distribution centres over and you can't recover. The management of the volume, the management through third-party support was seamless through those 2 teams. And I can't thank them enough. But those are the 4 key points I think made a real difference to serving our colleagues and customers better. And then finally, what have we learned from this and what are we going to do? We often talk to customers who tell us that location is number 1, then it's ease, then it might be quality, then it might be range, then it might be value. But actually safety's jumped right up with ease now. Safety's sitting number 1, number 2. And as I said, if you don't have shops that colleagues feel safe in, and colleagues do tell customers if they don't feel safe, customers will vote with their feet potentially elsewhere. So safety needs focus, never off it. Then value. Many customers are going to start watching the pennies. We're just entering back to school, which, as we all know, myself being a dad of 4 children, 3 of them at school, actually one of the most expensive times of the year outside Christmas to buy uniforms, to buy bags, to buy pencils and get your kids ready for school. Very expensive. So value is going to be paramount. Have a cheaper basket within the one-stop business. And then meal solutions and fresh food. Scratch cooking, family occasions, garden occasions. I need to do more. I need to be more inspirational for customers. And then finally, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, vital components to your presence online and your brand, and redeveloping that and continue to develop it. And also building e-commerce and our online presence through small basket fulfillment. Re-evaluating our store categories. So we've already changed our shops in the last month to what customers tell us they want more of and less of through COVID. We've got a brilliant traditional estate, which we call our heritage estate, which is original CTNs. that are now great convenience shops. Then we have a blueprint estate, which is a little bit more similar to Co-op, Express and JS Local in size and look and feel. But we're redeveloping a second generation that takes all the learnings from COVID and adjusts our business slightly, and the word is adjustment, slightly for the next decade. And we help customers on safety, ease, value, solutions, fresh food and more convenience. But finally, all of it underpinned with great value and quality focus. We need to weave more value through our convenience market. We need to weave more value through the customer's basket, but with a great dose of quality. The customers feel these local shops across the UK that have delivered really, really well for customers in a pandemic, and when they needed them most, continue that. I hope those points help, and I hope those points help maybe hold on to some of the trade we've increased in our businesses across all convenience retailers in the UK. Thanks again for having me. I look forward to meeting a lot of you in the future. Take care.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Johnny, Matthew and Nikki, three great presentations. And really addressing the agenda I said at the beginning about colleagues, about food and about the COVID experience, and has that really changed anything, which is one of the things I want to address now. So you've got a short panel discussion to try to get into that. Please do, to the audience, please do send us questions on the chat, and I'll try to ask as many as I can during today and pick them up in the later sessions as well. I want to go straight in though to talk about colleagues, and Matthew focused on this in his first presentation. I'm going to start with Johnny. Johnny, looking ahead, imagine we're sat here at Summit 25 and we're talking about what's happening in the industry at the moment, 5 years on. Who's behind the till at a one-stop store in 2025? You know, are they the same profile of colleague now? Are they a robot or are more tasked, automated? Are they a gig economy worker? Who do you see staffing one-stop stores into the future?
Hi, James. Well, there won't be a robot. I think what we'll see is, so I think first and foremost, it will still be very, very local recruitment. So I imagine that where we see probably just over 70% of our colleagues in our own business live in the streets that actually the shop exists. I think that will grow. I do think the gig economy will play an even bigger part. People finishing shifts in different places of work and coming to do a shift in a convenience shop. I think it will grow, and it needs to grow quicker actually, because I think it will service the local community again better. I actually believe that what we'll see is that the profile of people deciding to work from home, people actually looking, as Matthew says, to have different careers potentially and different part-time jobs potentially. But I believe the nucleus will be really, really focused on the local community. And where it's 70, 80, it'll be in the 90s potentially in the future, where that shop is served by people who live in the streets where the shop exists.
Yeah, okay, it's really interesting. Nikki, thinking about food and food to go and food service, traditionally quite labour intensive parts of the offer. Do you agree, or do you think we're going to be having a different profile of people delivering that offer in store?
No, I would agree. I think we're still going to have to employ local people, because I think what we've found certainly throughout the pandemic and through lockdown is that actually the whole community element of C stores is what makes them stand out from the big box retailers. So the labour intensive elements around food to go, they are still going to be labour intensive, undoubtedly, but what we're doing now is looking at solutions to help make that easier for people. So where we can go semi-prepared or we can bring in pre-packed, then we will. But we are absolutely committed to ensuring that we've got the right colleagues in our store, because we believe it's the community element, to build on what Johnny was saying around the localness, that is really going to stand us apart. And certainly in 2025, I've got no reason to doubt that would be any different. Okay, and Matthew, you talked about the 7 features of good work, and you talked about how you give a very positive view of our sector and employment in our sector and the relationships between colleagues and customers. And we might look at it and say, well, we offer local, secure, flexible work, so therefore we're in a good place. Challenge us a bit. Are we being a bit complacent? Do we think might we have problems finding the colleagues we want to find into the future?
Well, you know, I think it's absolutely vital. I mean, I completely agree with Johnny's view of what the future holds. I think it's absolutely vital that gig work is what I described in my report for the government a few years ago as genuine two-way flexibility. I think people have to absolutely see that the flexibility it provides to the store, to the business, is matched by flexibility for workers, that it feels like a fair relationship. And, you know, the government's got a role in that. The government has been sitting for a year now on recommendations from the Low Pay Commission, which suggests that there should be fines for late cancellation of shifts, for example, or minimum notice of shifts. So there are things that we could do around 0 hours contracts and gig work, which would just help to even it up slightly, to reassure the public that there's absolutely nothing. At the moment, I think if you said to the public, is gig work a bad thing, they'd say yes. If you said to them 0 hours contracts a bad thing, they'd say yes. So there's a reputational issue here, which is the public has come to perceive these forms of alternative forms of working as being problematic. And that's probably been exacerbated, to be honest, by COVID. So there's still a really important piece of work to be done, which is to reassure the public that these forms of work can be fair and they can fit the lives of individuals, which I firmly believe. And, you know, and by the way, you know, there are those in the trade unions on the left who very much hold the position that only kind of full-time, long-term employment, that's the gold standard. And if it's not that, then it's kind of problematic. So, you know, we need to make sure that people perceive this as being fair in two ways. But the second thing is that I absolutely believe that convenience stores, you know, there is a kind of, and obviously you'll tell me if this is wrong, but there's always a kind of view, isn't there, that the smaller things, the neighborhood things are kind of not really cutting edge. You know, what's cutting edge is the internet and big things and Amazon and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I think you have to reverse that. I think you have to say that convenience stores are the cutting edge. And the reason they're the cutting edge is because what they speak to is not just people's consumer needs, but they speak to people's social needs. And something I didn't talk about in my talk is, you know, one of the biggest problems in modern society is loneliness. And indeed, there's quite a lot of evidence that suggests that loneliness and social isolation is a massive cause of an awful lot of the kind of problems that we have in society, to do with polarization, to do with pessimism, to do with depression, etc., etc., etc. And it seems to me that convenience stores have the opportunity to say, look, you know, what we exemplify is a model of consumerism, which, yes, meets people's needs for good products at a good price and all of that, but is absolutely integrally involved in being part of the social capital of communities. And one of the reasons we treat our colleagues well, we treat them well because we care about them, because they're colleagues, but we treat them well because we know if we treat them well, they'll treat customers well. And that's absolutely critical to the offer that we make. And in the end, you see, if you make that offer, then, you know, Amazon can go hang, because whatever Amazon can offer, it can't offer that. It can't offer a smile. It can't offer, I haven't seen you for a few days, how are you? You know, it can't. And so, you know, I think this is a real moment of opportunity if the sector chooses the high road. If it chooses the low road, you know, it's screwed, and I don't care about you anyway, to be honest.
Thank you. Great endorsement. I think about some of the points you heard earlier about how we did a lot of change crammed into a short period of time, and maybe some of the things that have always been the case about our role in the community have just got recognised that much more. And you know, these things are talking about, they're not new, but I think when there's a pandemic, when there's a real crisis, people recognise and value those things maybe a bit more than they did before. We can talk about colleagues much more, but I want to move on to food, the second question I asked, really. I want to pick up on something that Nikki and then Johnny also alluded to, which is about sort of brands in city centres who are under quite high profile challenges at the moment. We hear about Pret all the time and some of the challenges for those businesses because their model and the footfall on which their model is built has changed. They've talked about, I heard Pret talking about changing their location profile. So whether it's Pret or someone else, that's not fixated on them, but is that sort of move a threat to our sector? Because that could then literally eat our lunch, take away some of that trade as we're trying to cater to those more home workers. Is it an opportunity? Is it a partnership opportunity? Should we be talking to those sorts of companies and trying to work with them because we're already in those locations? Nikki, I'll start with you and then come to you, Johnny, on that.
Well, we actually see this as an opportunity within our C-store network, and that we will be able to capture some of that trade. Obviously, the less people that are going out to work and, you know, the decline in footfall in city centres is obviously a challenge and one that we are facing into. And, you know, in my presentation, I talked a lot about how we're developing the ranges and trying to create solutions to make things easier for our consumers. But certainly around the whole food to go element, we believe that that's an area that we already excel in, actually. We are really focused on that. And I alluded to it to say that, you know, I think this whole food to go, I think, is a bit of a misnomer. Certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, it absolutely dropped off a cliff. I think we were all in uncharted territories. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew what we should be doing. We were all just sitting at home trying to buy toilet roll or bread or pasta or tinned tomatoes, not really focusing on, you know, what we were eating for lunch. But I think as we've moved through this, certainly what we've seen is actually our own food to go sales are you know, almost back up to the levels that they were. So there is absolutely a market for food to go, and we absolutely see this moving much more into the food to go at home area now. So whether people are working in offices or they're working at home, they are still working. There is still a market there if you can capture it. And so we're obviously partnering with the brands that we've already partnered with, you know, Subway and Greggs, and those are working really well for us. But we are absolutely committed to growing our own food to go around the Daily Deli brand, Chow Chow brand as well. We see it as a huge opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So clearly an opportunity in that growth in the market. But is it going to attract in competitors, Johnny? Are your neighbourhood stores going to be competing head-to-head with the Pret now or something like that?
I'm not too sure they'll compete head-to-head with a Pret, but you know what? There's something Nikki said which I wrote down, which is actually a real great rule of thumb: fail fast and move on. We've always got competitors around us. If a sandwich shop opens up as a competitor, if a coffee shop opens up, if a takeaway opens up, it's got a tendency to take some of your customers. So actually, I think for us, it's about, you know what, you just got to show agility to how you serve your customers. You've also got to show agility to what brand you bring in. We're just launching the Jack's brand into one-stop budget in Londis to actually give some better entry tier, good quality price points that actually we feel the market may need right now in the communities we serve. And if a competitor opens up doing sandwiches, which are maybe competitive in price or competitive in quality, then we just need to react to that quite quickly as well. Sitting in your hands isn't the answer. But actually, as I say, it's, we've always got competitors opening up around us, so we just need to be pretty fleet of foot to react to it.
Nikki, I want to come back to you about food. I had a question about food waste. Running volume promotions, buy one, second one for a penny, for example. You talk about great promotion, great structure to it. Does that have implications in terms of food waste? Does it encourage more food waste in the business? Is that something you considered?
Yeah, it's absolutely something that we considered. You know, the products that we are running the buy one, get one for a penny on tend to be the longer life products. So we've deliberately excluded the fresh products for two reasons. Firstly, because we need to make sure we can ensure availability. And secondly, around the waste piece as well, because in order to satisfy that demand, we would have had to bought in so many additional products that either consumers would have been wasting it at home or we could have potentially been wasting it in store, which is clearly not where we want to be. So we have considered it, but we also we're about to roll out you know, a partnership with Too Good To Go as well, the waste app. So we're working really hard to try and minimise waste both for consumers and in store at the moment. So it's on our radar, it's on our agenda, but we believe we've got it covered.
Okay, brilliant. I want to sort of finish off now a question about social media. And the reason being that we've it's come up from the questions on the chat, and I was interested in it anyway about we talk about the offer, how we're developing it. It struck me that around the start of this COVID crisis, we probably, well, my sense was we weren't that well set up to communicate changes and developments and safety in store, whether it's new offers, new products to our consumers and our communities that well, because we weren't maybe using social media that well as a sector. Is that fair? Am I being unfair? Was actually our sector much better in terms of social media? And where have we got to now? Matthew, you're going to come in, just see you put your hand up to make a comment.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just want to make one more contribution, and then you know you can go back to the experts. But look, you know, I link 2 points here. One is, I think one of the organisational challenges that the sector needs to think about is that if you are really going to have stores that feel intensely local, you're going to have to devolve authority to people at a local level. And actually, if you look at the models of organizations around the world that have radically devolved, for example, Buurtzorg, which is a Dutch health provider, you know, it is actually possible to really devolve authority within an organization as long as you have strong backbone of data and things like that, which enable people that you've devolved to be able to see their performance and to be able to respond to underperformance. So I think an organizational question for for convenience store chains is how to devolve so that it's really authentic that those stores are local and their reference points are local and they have the capacity to do things locally. And I would link that into the social media point, because the social media that local convenience stores should be involved in is next door. You know, it's the local WhatsApp group. You know, it's, and it goes to, and my final point, it goes to your point about food waste. You will find in all sorts of places, there are loads of great charities that if you can link into them as a local store, will take food waste off your hands and they'll take it to the food bank or they'll distribute it. So, but to empower local store managers to develop those kinds of local relationships, that kind of local profile, to be engaged in local conversations of that kind, you know, you have to think about the skills that are required and the structure of your organization that enables that to happen, and also manage some of the risks that might be attendant upon giving that people that level of freedom.
Yeah, that is a brilliant point, Matthew. I mean, Johnny, I'll come to you for the last word on that in terms of giving that power, that delegation, and also how you use that in terms of communication and social media. Where's that sitting on One Stop's agenda?
Yeah, do you know what? It's, our social media team is run through our customer team, but also most of our shops have Facebook accounts. Just on Matthew's point, do you know what? If you're on Facebook or Twitter and you talk about a deal, yeah, do you know what? It resonates okay with the customer. If you talk about community competitions and prizes, it over-indexes massively. Customers are more interested to see what your shop's doing in the community and what it's doing for a charity or what it's doing to entertain children in summer holidays than it is if you're doing a half-price 6-pack of Fanta. So actually, we tend to lean far more into community and prizes and care for the community than it is about just constantly going over price.
Yeah, brilliant points to finish with. I think we could carry on talking for another half an hour, but we've come to the end of our allotted time. So the first thing is to thank Matthew, Nikki and Johnny for 3 fantastic presentations and fantastic contributions in that panel discussion. And secondly, to thank people for their questions, and then to say, we're now taking a break. We've got some adverts during our break. We don't go for we're not providing coffee, unfortunately. We're not getting that delivered to all of your homes or wherever your office is where you're watching this. But do take the time to get yourself a cup of tea, whatever you need, and then come back here for the next session, which starts at 11:15. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Love shopping in store, but it can be so frustrating. Research shows that 66% of us are dissatisfied by aspects of the in-store experience, yet 71% don't like online grocery shopping either. There's now an opportunity for a faster, easier, best of both experience. It's time to shop smarter. Introducing Ubermarket's multi-award-winning Scan, Pay, Go shopping app. Everything you need, all in one place. Yes, it's branded for stores, but here's our secret. We built it for shoppers. For a quick shop, just scan the barcodes, tap to pay, and you're good to go. For that bigger shop, our magic shopping list takes over. Create your list, tap to add offers, and the app rearranges it, guiding you straight to your items. See your spend, savings, allergens and environmental impact all in real time. Bag your items as you shop, tap to pay and go. Never wait in line again. It's fast, it's hygienic, it's secure, it's easy. So it's great for shoppers. How about retailers? We'll bring your store into the future, integrating seamlessly with your systems without requiring any new hardware, future-proofing your stores and minimizing the need for checkouts. With AI tech and machine learning, we help you engage on a deeper level with your individual customers, sending them automatically personalized offers with touch points before, during and after their shop. Our data proves that engagement on this level and eliminating friction increases footfall, store loyalty and basket size, while decreasing your cost of sale. Ubermarket. It's time to shop smarter. Lines? Where we're going, we don't need lines.
My dad died a couple of years ago, and it set off a chain of stuff going in my head that I wasn't able to control very well. At the same time, at work, we lost our only supplier, Palmer and Harvey. They went under, and that caused horrendous work issues. And then there was an incident at work, and I just snapped. I just left the building and didn't go back for 3 months. My wife came home and I was just sat in the corner there, tears streaming down my face, just not knowing why. I just didn't understand. I've always said to my family that, you know, if I start losing it, just get me to the Humber Bridge and I'll deal with it. And I really thought that that's what I was going to do, and just take the leap into the unknown. I went to my GP, who suggested some NHS course of treatment. But that was appalling. There were 60 people in the room, with a young 22-year-old girl trying to read her script to us. There was a HR girl called Andrea, and she actually suggested grocery aid. And they suggested a course of therapy which involved having a chat on the phone for an hour a session. She'd sent me a book that was about mindfulness. I just started to get it. The techniques she taught me worked, and I was able to sleep at last. Costco were also very good. They suggested I go back in 1 day a week. The 1 day a week became 2 days a week, became 4 days a week. We've introduced a mental health walk where once a month we go out with other members of staff and just clear our heads and just have a chat. We need to be able to quieten our minds, and I thank Grocery Aid for giving me the ability to quieten my mind, because without it I don't know where I'd be now. If I can help just one person, then all of this would have been worthwhile.
We love shopping in store, but it can be so frustrating. Research shows that 66% of us are dissatisfied by aspects of the in-store experience, yet 71% don't like online grocery shopping either. There's now an opportunity for a faster, easier, best of both experience. It's time to shop smarter. Introducing Ubermarket's multi-award-winning Scan, Pay, Go shopping app. Everything you need, all in one place. Yes, it's branded for stores, but here's our secret. We built it for shoppers. For a quick shop, just scan the barcodes, tap to pay, and you're good to go. For that bigger shop, our magic shopping list takes over. Create your list, tap to add offers, and the app rearranges it, guiding you straight to your items. See your spend, savings, allergens and environmental impact all in real time. Bag your items as you shop, tap to pay and go. Never wait in line again. It's fast, it's hygienic, it's secure, it's easy. So it's great for shoppers. How about retailers? We'll bring your store into the future, integrating seamlessly with your systems without requiring any new hardware, future-proofing your stores and minimizing the need for checkouts. With AI tech and machine learning, we help you engage on a deeper level with your individual customers, sending them automatically personalized offers with touch points before, during and after their shop. Our data proves that engagement on this level and eliminating friction increases footfall, store loyalty and basket size while decreasing your cost of sale. Ubermarket. It's time to shop smarter. Lines? Where we're going, we don't need lines.
My dad died a couple of years ago, and it set off a chain of stuff going in my head that I wasn't able to control very well. At the same time, at work, we lost our only supplier, Palmer and Harvey. They went under, and that caused horrendous work issues. And then there was an incident at work, and I just snapped. I just left the building and didn't go back for 3 months. My wife came home and I was just sat in the corner there, tears streaming down my face, just not knowing why. I just didn't understand. I've always said to my family that, you know, if I start losing it, just get me to the Humber Bridge and I'll deal with it. And I really thought that that's what I was going to do, and just take the leap into the unknown. I went to my GP, who suggested some NHS course of treatment. But that was appalling. There were 60 people in the room, with a young 22-year-old girl trying to read her script to us. There was a HR girl called Andrea, and she actually suggested grocery aid. And they suggested a course of therapy which involved having a chat on the phone for an hour a session. She'd sent me a book that was about mindfulness. I just started to get it. The techniques she taught me worked, and I was able to sleep at last. Costco were also very good. They suggested I go back in 1 day a week. The 1 day a week became 2 days a week, became 4 days a week. We've introduced a mental health walk where once a month we go out with other members of staff and just clear our heads and just have a chat. We need to be able to quieten our minds, and I thank Grocery Aid for giving me the ability to quieten my mind, because without it I don't know where I'd be now. If I can help just one person, then all of this would have been worthwhile.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all got a drink and also had time to enjoy those adverts from our sponsors. And thanks again to Uber Market, Christie's and Cook for their support of this event. I've got a very simple task now, just to hand over to my colleague, Chris Noyce, our Communications Director, to take you through the 2020 ACS Local Shop Report and then to bring together a panel to discuss what it means for our sector. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, James. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Noyce, Communications Director at ACS, and I'm going to be taking you through this year's Local Shop Report. Here it is. Here's the report. I should say that you should have the report in your basket, in your resource centre through the Summit platform. Otherwise, it is available to download now on our website, and some of you might have a print copy winging its way to you as well. So please follow along with the report as we go through. I just want to start and say that actually lots of this wouldn't be possible without the support and the data provided by the people you see on the screen here. And this is especially important and especially a fantastic achievement this year because of everything that we've had over the last 6 months. And data collection has been a challenge, but I'm pleased to say that we do have a full report to provide to you today. Let's get into it then, and you'll be pleased to know that Wales has retained its crown again as the most shopulated part of the UK. It's our word, so we'll continue using it. As James said earlier, the number of independent retailers has stayed pretty steady for the last several years now, and to be honest, we operate everywhere. We are a pretty even split between urban stores, suburban stores, and rural businesses, and keep that figure in your mind a little bit later on. When we're talking about some of the COVID impact stuff later on in the presentation. Now, this is a really important figure, and we talk about the challenges that face high streets and some of the issues that are facing town centres, but realistically less than 1 in 6 stores are located on a main high street or within a city centre. Typically, the majority of retailers are out there on their own or as part of a very small parade. So everything that we're talking about the performance of the sector is even more impressive because of that sort of lack of proximity to other businesses. And the last year has been a pretty impressive one in terms of sales. So a real boost in the total sales of the sector, £44.7 billion now, which is an enormous number to give to government. And I would say that yes, this is affected by lockdown and what we saw during lockdown, but I'd see it as an acceleration rather than a change of direction, because I think we were certainly going this way and there was growth predicted anyway, but certainly acceleration over the last 6 months, and who knows, perhaps we'll see that continuing in the same vein in coming years. In terms of what we sell, I won't go into detail here, but you see the 2 different baskets there for independents and the overall market. And it's just an illustration to show how diverse those baskets are and the diversity of which kind of product types that those different types of stores rely on. And as we all know, if you're making money, the taxman's going to come knocking. So as you'd expect, we've seen an increase in the amount that we're contributing to the Treasury, both directly and indirectly. And the one thing I would just highlight here is business rates and that contribution in business rates, because next year that contribution will be either zero or very close to zero because of the holiday that was announced by the Chancellor earlier this year. And not only are we still generating a lot for the economy, but we're also still investing. And investment is one of the areas that we talk to government about a lot. Being able to say that our sector has invested over £500 million over the last year is a really powerful thing. As you might expect, multiples typically invest the most per store through to symbols and then down to independents on the left-hand side there. And if anything, that investment figure is even more impressive when you look at where the source of investment is coming from. So for independent retailers, the vast majority is coming from their own reserves, and just 5% there, just a very small number coming from bank funding. So as we hear about the tightening of belts from banks due to COVID and all of those concerns, but actually we're not anticipating that that's going to have a significant impact on our sector. So what stores investing in then? Well, the big thing to highlight is delivery and click and collect services, because that's been a real growth area over the last 6 months especially. But this is certainly still the direction of travel. It's again an acceleration rather than a change of direction. And again, that is a testament to the adaptability of the sector to be able to provide those services from a pretty low base previously. And I've also highlighted here just one figure about charged cash machines increasing. That is an increase on last year, and it is concerning because retailers and consumers prefer to have a free-to-use cash machine, and this is a figure that we're keeping a very close eye on and talking to policymakers about as well. When it comes to food service, we've talked for many years about the opportunity in coffee, and please say that's starting to reflect in the figures a bit more. More than a third of stores now have a customer-operated coffee machine, and we were expecting actually for some of these food service areas to go down because of concerns about COVID and safety and food safety and health and safety and all those kind of things. But actually, the feedback that we got from retailers was that, if anything, because everything else was shut, as soon as builders and workers and people like that started to go back, the only place really they could go and get lunch or a sandwich or some breakfast was their local shop. So if anything, it's actually been a growth area over the last few months into the last year, and another one certainly to keep an eye on to see if that growth can be sustained. I mentioned cash earlier, and I would just say here that when you ask consumers, the most valuable service for them is having a cash machine. So having access to cash in their local shop is really valued, and that's again a really powerful thing that we can take to government and to policymakers to make sure that free access to cash is still a priority. Let's talk about tech then, and some really interesting stats here from the work that we've been doing with Google and looking at Google Trends. And I talked about increases in delivery, and that's certainly mirrored by what consumers are searching for. They're looking for a shop near them that is, that can do parcels, that can do delivery, local farm shops, all those kind of things. Really interesting. And in terms of the most searched for period of time when you look at local shops, usually it's Christmas. Usually it's the week of Christmas. Usually it's people that have burnt the turkey, have forgotten the stuffing, and that week of Christmas they need their local shop because of an emergency. But this year, as you might expect, the start of lockdown, that first week of lockdown, was the most searched for in terms of people looking for local shops than any other time in the last 12 months. And it's not even close. It's a huge jump during that start of March there. So some really interesting stuff there. In terms of what we're accepting in terms of payments, these figures are pretty similar every year. But the one thing I would point out is that despite all the talk of cashless society, especially given the context of COVID, 100% of the retailers we spoke to for the local shop report still accept cash. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think there is a mutual appreciation from both retailers and customers that cash is still a very, very important part of the business. I spoke earlier about investment being one of the killer stats that we take to government, and that £500 million invested. Well, this, if anything, is probably even more important than that. And we can say that we as a sector are huge employers of people. And this even has grown over the last year. So 412,000 people employed in the convenience sector in the UK. And these are flexible, local and secure jobs. And this illustrates that. So they're, broad range of hours worked by people, and an increase since last year of the proportion of people that have either childcare commitments or are caring for other family members. And again, if anything, over the last 6 months, this has probably increased again, with schools closed, with people having to isolate and all that kind of thing. Really important that the people working in shops have that flexibility of their working hours because of the extra commitments that they have. I mentioned these jobs are secure. Don't take my word for it. This is the word of the people that we surveyed for this. Less than 1 in 6 say that their jobs are not secure in the convenience sector, and 93% of colleagues on a permanent contract. These are not 0 hours contracts. These are not mainly temporary contracts. These are local, flexible, secure jobs, as I said. And when you look at what people want to be doing in the future, more than half are saying that they would see themselves in either the same or a more senior role in the convenience sector as well. So I think that's a real testament to the work that retailers are doing to make working in the sector a viable career choice and one that works with people's lives. And I think when we talk about what retailers are doing, I think essentially retailers are working bloody hard. You don't need me to tell you that. 1 in 5 working more than 60 hours a week. I think when you look at the last 6 months, I think that figure's probably gone way up beyond that. And 1 in 4 retailers taking no holiday per year, and that's not that surprising either. So yeah, some of that is retailers are working extremely hard, and they continue to do so. And I'm pleased to say, actually, that's not necessarily putting retailers off. So 1 in 5, again, been working in the business for more than 25 years, veterans of convenience, and we're still attracting new entrepreneurs into the sector. Almost 1 in 3 now have been in the business 5 years or less, have been new entrants into the sector, which is, again, really important to get those new ideas into convenience as well. When we look at sourcing, and this isn't specifically about COVID, but so typically there's a pretty broad spectrum of retailers getting all their products delivered, getting all their products from cash and carry, and then a pretty big chunk in the middle that are getting some from here, some from there. When you talk about lockdown, I think actually that middle segment of retailers getting some from here, some from there, some from all over the place will have vastly expanded. And I think everyone will have seen the pictures, will have been aware of queuing up at cash and carries, going to other local suppliers, going to catering suppliers, all that kind of thing, just to keep shelves stocked. And that again is a testament to the flexibility and the adaptability that retailers have shown over the last few months. I mentioned COVID there. Let's talk specifically about COVID then, and some interesting things to pick out about what happened during lockdown. I asked you at the start just to bear in mind that figure of the pie chart of rural, urban, and suburban retailers, and that's not directly, but pretty closely matches how sales have been. So if you're in a rural or a suburban area, then typically you probably would have seen sales increase during COVID, during lockdown. And if you're in a city centre or near a transport hub or near a business that is otherwise closed, so like a shopping centre, something like that, then you would have taken a hit in terms of sales. When it comes to how people are behaving when they're into stores, so they're not coming in as much typically, but they're spending more, and that's certainly something that we've seen not just from our surveys, but from all the research out there about what people are doing. And as we say, they're not just spending a little bit more; they're spending a significant amount more, which has led to that significant increase in overall sales in the sector. The other thing, and I alluded to this earlier about COVID and home delivery, 600,000 home deliveries a week now. And this is just another fantastic example of adaptability in the sector, because this came from a very low base of home deliveries being given. It was a pretty informal thing. It was usually to the odd elderly customer or vulnerable customer, but now getting to a point of over 500,000 deliveries going out from our sector per week, that's an enormous achievement and shouldn't be underestimated. And thankfully, the people that we're delivering to are coming from pretty close to the store. So more than half coming from less than a quarter of a mile away, and 4 out of 5 coming from less than a mile away. So when we talk about the catchment, the community area of our stores, it is very much people that are typically walking to stores. They're typically very close, and it is very much the local shop. And we use those terms very deliberately. And if the local shop wasn't there, then they are travelling a significantly higher distance. So they're typically going up to 2 or 3 miles instead of going from within a mile. And for elderly customers, for vulnerable customers, for customers that don't have access to cars, vehicles, all that kind of thing, then if the local shop wasn't there, groceries are basically out of reach unless you're getting home deliveries. And we saw all of the challenges with deliveries from supermarkets not being able to get out to people. So again, those local businesses, that location is so important to what we do. And so with that said, it's no surprise really, that we are the #1 service that people believe has a positive impact in their local area. We've been doing this survey for a number of years now, and we've been, for a number of years, second behind the post office. And it's just been a slight switch this year, so we're first, but we always claimed 1 and 2 because, of course, post offices are a really important part of convenience store businesses and pharmacies. As you would expect, pharmacies are a very important part of community life, and again, a growing area in the convenience sector. And we're still a sector that's built on community engagement, and providing things like donations to food banks, especially this year, is incredibly important in the current climate. So it's encouraging to see that there's been an increase in donations to food banks on last year, and for the amount of time that we've been doing this survey, it very rarely dips under about 4 in 5 retailers having some impact on their community through collecting money, through sports teams, through local engagement, all those kinds of things, extremely important. And finally, for me, I just want to touch on the role of community shops. And during lockdown, I spoke to Harriet from the Plunkett Foundation on the Local Shop podcast, and she kindly provided this data for us on community shops. And she was saying that during lockdown, there was a huge increase in volunteers, partly young people as well, not just older people, specifically because being in a community shop means that you can chat to customers and socialise. And one of the most popular roles was actually doing the queuing outside and being able to chat to people while they were waiting and maintaining social distancing. And I just wanted to finish on that because while providing products and services and the sales and the technology and everything, that's really important, that's essential to what we do, but we should never underestimate the importance of seeing a friendly face in your local shop. And I think the community role of local shops is just as powerful as those big numbers that I talked about earlier that we take to government. And that is, of course, again, a testament to all of you, and the work that you're doing every day. So that's everything from this year's local shop report, or at least some of the highlights as I see them. Again, as I say, you should have a copy of the report, and if you would like multiple copies, if you're planning to get back to the office and you want copies for every desk, then please get in touch with me afterwards, and I can help sort that out for you. Great, and I'm pleased to say actually that since we released the report to members yesterday, we've had over 5,000 downloads already. So again, really strong interaction with the sector, especially when we tell people not to share things. So let's move to the panel now, and I've got 3 legends of the convenience sector. We've got Michael O'Loughlin, Loretta Lingite, and Aidan Fortune. Thank you for joining me on the panel. I'll start with you, Michael. And one of the things I talked about on the panel was about investment. And we've seen a slight dip off in investment over the last year. Can stores, especially in the current environment, can stores afford to stand still at the moment?
Well, I think what we saw, Chris, was we saw obviously the outcome of Brexit, and I think that concerned people. And I think a lot of retailers had that in their mind and what that would mean for their business. So a lot of people are maybe hoarding cash and deciding not to invest in 2020 or have made those investments from previous years. But over the last number of months, I've spent a lot of time on the road meeting retailers. And of course, retailers were members of the community that had to work through the COVID period, while a lot of us corporate people were able to stay at home and do what we're doing today. But they had to face the community. So I met those guys, and many of those people said to me that what they found out during COVID was the biggest strengths in their businesses, but they also found out where their business was lacking and where the biggest weaknesses were. And every one of those guys and people, retailers that I met, all were determined that they would allow the dust to settle. They're all reviewing their businesses at the moment, and they're all planning future investments. Everybody I spoke to wanted to grow their network of opportunities as independent retailers, wanted to improve their stores. And a lot of them were reviewing the offer that they currently provide to their customer, and again, seeing the shortcomings in them. Some of them were one topic, maybe we're big on alcohol, or maybe we're too strong on convenience, or maybe not strong enough. And of course, what happened during that 8-week period was all our local communities that surround our stores went out for the hunt for rice and the hunt for bread and baking products and so on. and stumbled into a store that they never really considered before, because they started at one end of the high street to find these products and visited everybody along the way. And of course, they tripped into us away from maybe the bigger brands and said, you know what, this is actually really good. This is a really great place to be. And maybe I should consider this store more often, and maybe they're more friendly. So I suppose we alluded in the earlier presentations, we've gained new customers. We've lots of new customers now. And I think the retailers that I met are looking at food service, they're looking at their convenience offer, they're looking at their fascia in some cases, because we spoke earlier on this morning about the supply chain let people down. So people are really having a long, hard look in the business. And I think, obviously, Brexit is still a concern, but everyone I spoke to, certainly there was no worries about funding future developments, future growth, and see what sticks, to see what lands after this, to see, are we going to be left with 10% of people working at home who Nikki mentioned this morning about serving them with lunches and so on. So yeah, I think investment will flow back, and businesses plan investment strategically. Any business I've ever been involved in, there was always a fund for investment, always where we're going to spend it. But that's the question, where are we going to spend it?
Mm. And Loretta, you're obviously an expert on category data, on category sales, and what's been happening over the last couple of months. Are there any specific areas that have really been highlighted to you as investment potential growth areas, or areas that stores should be making more of?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And I think I need to agree with what Michael said, that we need to wait a little bit for longer for the dust to settle and see what the growth areas are. But the biggest opportunity for independent convenience are now to keep the new shoppers, to keep people who discovered independent convenience stores. And this points for me in the way I see things going forward towards engagement, towards shopper engagement. So for neighborhood shops, for local shops, that would definitely be a community engagement. And we tend to speak about investment in the sector in monetary value in terms of sort of from the perspective of the macroeconomic. But I think it's time to start talking about investments in the sector from the perspective of return on investment. And for example, investing in people, investing a community steward who would dedicate 2-3 hours a week, thinking about how to engage with local shoppers, how to reach out to new shoppers, how to engage and keep the loyal shoppers could have a sort of a lower investment value, but much, much higher return on investment longer term. So that would be my advice for retailers. Stop and think before making those investment decisions. But I guess
it's a really interesting point, Loretta, and I just want to bring Aidan in, because Aidan, you had the unique experience of being in the sector, coming out of the sector for a little while, and then coming back in. And I think most of the people on the conference will agree that you never really leave convenience once you're in. When we talk about investment, we talk about what's changed, and we've been doing these reports for almost 10 years now. What surprised you coming back into the sector, and perhaps what's changed and what hasn't changed?
Well, what's changed? I mean, I think the use of data, how retailers are embracing technology, I think that's fantastic. They're really being forensic about it, utilizing their EPOS and information and informing their category management around that. What hasn't changed is also technology. Your report shows that I think it's only 74% EPOS penetration in convenience. I had a look back on the data. I think it was 48% in 2014. So it's obviously jumped quite significantly, but there's still 26% of retailers who aren't using EPOS, which I find crazy in 2020.
Yeah, I guess they're in the point of they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I mean, it's all our jobs to help with that, but I just think that was quite an eye opener for me. And then also the number of, you spoke about the coffee machines. It's jumped 10 percentage points year on year. I think that's something that's really grown, as the offering has been fantastically improved. in the 5 years I've been out of the sector. And I think that's only going to grow as more people are working from home. We all know that even a coffee that you didn't prepare yourself was a treat during lockdown. So I think retailers are very well placed to take advantage of that.
Yeah, if you're in my home, anything you didn't prepare yourself is a bonus. My wife can testament to that. Michael, one of the other areas that's really grown during lockdown and we've seen some sustained growth in is home delivery. And like I said in my presentation, from a very low base, home delivery has grown. Do you think this is sustainable into the coming months and years? And do you think this is the future?
Well, it's funny, Chris, during lockdown, I was at home a lot and I did home delivery from my local chemist. And they had various people on prescriptions every day. I just sort of got roped into it in the local community thing. And it's funny, through that home delivery service, which wasn't online or wasn't through an app, I got to know tons of people in my community, and delivering a simple prescription, usually after a couple of weeks, turned into a cup of tea at the end of the garden to an elderly neighbour. And to this day, as I walk through the village I live in, my wife asks me, "How do you know all these elderly ladies?" Which is quite difficult, but it's really a really great thing to have got out of that. But I think that 17% of convenience stores today, according in the report, offer online and offer an app, and I think that's a massive opportunity to do this. That means that there's 83% of retail stores that are missing out on a customer who wants that level of convenience and wants that home delivery. So I think everybody, that's one area, that's a 17, as Aidan says, in relation to the coffee, who I've always been passionate about, but in relation to the online, that's something that is going to just jump, I'd imagine, tenfold and tenfold. And there's so many operators out there, and I'm sure the offer will get better. And before I left MFG, we launched an MFG in 10 stores 18 months ago, not knowing that this would happen. And even then, it was a great success. It was actually Paul Chima who suggested to me, who's been running an online offer for the last number of years, and he's built up a significant business with that. So it takes time. Paul used to say to me his best customer was one family a mile away who just never liked going to the shops. They just ordered everything online, didn't care. It was just all about convenience. So that customer is there, and it's there for everybody. I'm sure every community has somebody who just wants that level of convenience. So I think you've got to put your time into it. There's lots of companies who can provide this service. Again, Nikki mentioned Curtis this morning for Spar Blakemore. We have our own in Simply Fresh. We have a partner who also provides this, but it's just something that people have got to get on board with. It's just, I think it's one of those things that will definitely grow.
Yeah, and to talk about home delivery, to talk about technology, it's all linked to this debate about cash and cash versus card. And Loretta, you've been tracking how cash in stores and independent stores has been performing over the last few months. I said in my presentation that I don't see the demise of cash coming anytime soon. Am I perhaps being a bit naive there?
Not at all. Card payments in independent convenience stores peaked in May, when 52% of sales value were paid by card. But as soon as, while leaving the hygiene aspect aside, this can be linked to increased basket spend. So as soon as average basket spend started to come down, cash overtook card payments once again in June, so fairly quickly. Cash has attributes which are unmatched by any other payment method. It helps users remain anonymous, it protects from cyber attacks, and it enables consumers to track their spend easily and much better. According to the recent study by Deutsche Bank, 40% of consumers find cash to be convenient, accessible everywhere, and secure. So cash isn't going anywhere. Sure. And that's what our data suggests from the recent months. As I said, there was a peak of card payments, but things are returning to normal if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I just want to bring Aidan in here. Talking about cash, and Aidan, you mentioned about EPOS earlier. Do you think retailers, and this is a question we had earlier on from one of the audience members, do you think retailers are making enough of data more generally? They're doing enough to understand who the customer is?
Some are, but not all. There's there's so much, there's so many levels of data and so much information you can get from customers. I would argue that no, they're not getting enough from the data that they currently have. And again, they probably just, it's an education issue. They need to be taught how to analyze their sales data and how to make more of it to increase their sales.
Last question to all of you then. I'll start with Michael. We talk every year about community engagement. We say community engagement is really important, and especially over the last 6 months, we've seen those communities almost expand, and certainly new people that have never come into stores before. In 2020 and moving forward, what does good community, or what does great community engagement look like?
I think obviously engaging more with these new customers we have. We've always had our existing customer base who are very comfortable to shop our shops, but now we've got this whole new raft of people. One of their requirements are going to be online shopping. So that's obviously something we're going to do. I noticed in your report that only 6% of convenience stores offer outside seating. I know I've spent the last number of weeks on the road, and it's impossible to find somewhere to meet at the moment. So we're meeting in, literally met in city centre open spaces. I've met in car parks. So I think, you know, we're going to see this for a long time. And there's places in your community which you sit down. So I think providing that space, if you can offer that space, is very good. I think looking at your range, looking at healthy eating, will encourage people in your community to shop your shop more. I suppose I've always been from a corporate background, and we've always used charity events and events like this to engage with the community. But we have the other independent retailers have always run events, and that's always a different way of doing things. But I think it's just, you know, being prepared for this new customer, making sure you're constantly meeting their needs, making sure, like I've been in the UK since 2008, and the shop report is around since 2012. And since that time, the level of offer that I have seen from the independent sector, the jumps it's made every year has been amazing. The ranging, the supply chain that's come into us has improved dramatically. And these are all things that have jumped immensely. Every year, it's incredible the difference. If we go back to 2008, we're in the middle of that financial crisis, to today. Convenience retailer, the independent, is so much stronger and constantly wants to improve, constantly wants to invest in their business. So I think that's going to be more of that. That growth is what's going to drive on this sector.
And Loretta, same question. But I guess you spoke earlier about investment in people. Is that the key to good community engagement?
I think so, but in this case, we need to think about shoppers more. And independent retailers have been doing a fantastic job in supporting local communities through contributions to local charities or responding to local emergencies like COVID, for example. But I think the vision for the future, starting from now, from 2020 and 21, is to make a local shop, especially neighborhood local shop, a center of attraction for food, nutrition, healthy and sustainable living and fun. And this could be done in store and through social media. So I think the vision is to move away from sort of a push strategy when you push through social media, new products and promotions, to more of a pull factors, such as new product tastings, meaningful games, for example, community nominations for who will receive the NPD kits or hampers, food waste and packaging recycling tips and competitions, recipe sharing, perhaps culinary parties or competitions. So things like that. It has to be about food. And this is much easier for stores, for independent retailers to actually make it more profitable for them, for themselves, and more relevant, not just sort of a ride on the theme of supporting charities. I think retailers need to be much more active. And this links back to my comments on investments. Investing in people, 2-3 hours a week could be more than enough. Someone who actually will think about things like that and organize things.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then Aidan, finally for you, you've seen a lot of stores. If those stores want to get to be the cream of the crop, they want to be the absolute best, what do those stores look like in terms of community engagement?
Well, they have to a mix of everything. I mean, everything Michael and Loretta have just said, but they have to be in 2020. You have to be a marketing expert, and you have to be so involved in community at a political level as well. In the report, I was quite surprised that only 4% are taking part in community council or projects like that. I think retailers is a great opportunity for retailers to get involved in their community at that level, and actually, they can inform the conversation rather than having to react to it. I think that's where the real growth can be seen in community retailing.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks to Michael, Loretta, and Aidan for taking part in the panel. I'm going to go off to the sponsor area now. I'm going to go and look at the fantastic sponsor booths from Cook, from Christie & Co, and from Uber Market, and I would encourage everyone else to do so. I'm going to go and do that now, put some trousers on, and I'll just hand back to James.
Thanks very much, Chris, Loretta, Michael, and Aidan. Really insightful discussion, as always. Local Shop Report, as always, packed with information. So I do take the time to download it and have a look through it. Obviously, underpins so much of what we do through the year. To reiterate what Chris just said, thanks to our sponsors, Cook, Christie's, and Uber Market, and do go spend a bit of time with them now in the sponsors lounge. And if you come back here for the final session, which starts just after 5 to 12. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
We love shopping in store, but it can be so frustrating. Research shows that 66% of us are dissatisfied by aspects of the in-store experience, yet 71% don't like online grocery shopping either. There's now an opportunity for a faster, easier, best of both experience. It's time to shop smarter. Introducing Uber Market's multi-award-winning Scan, Pay, Go shopping app. Everything you need, all in one place. Yes, it's branded for stores, but here's our secret. We built it for shoppers. For a quick shop, just scan the barcodes, tap to pay, and you're good to go. For that bigger shop, our magic shopping list takes over. Create your list, tap to add offers, and the app rearranges it, guiding you straight to your items. See your spend, savings, allergens, and environmental impact all in real time. Bag your items as you shop, tap to pay, and go. Never wait in line again. It's fast, it's hygienic, it's secure, it's easy. So, it's great for shoppers. How about retailers? We'll bring your store into the future, integrating seamlessly with your systems without requiring any new hardware, future-proofing your stores and minimizing the need for checkouts. With AI tech and machine learning, we help you engage on a deeper level with your individual customers, sending them automatically personalized offers with touch points before, during, and after their shop. Our data proves that engagement on this level and eliminating friction increases footfall, store loyalty, and basket size, while decreasing your cost of sale. Uber Market. It's time to shop smarter. Lines? Where we're going, we don't need lines.
My dad died a couple of years ago, and it set off a chain of stuff going in my head that I wasn't able to control very well. At the same time, at work, we lost our only supplier, Palmer and Harvey. They went under, and that caused horrendous work issues. And then there was an incident at work, and I just snapped. I just left the building and didn't go back for 3 months. My wife came home, and I was just sat in the corner there, tears streaming down my face, just not knowing why. I just didn't understand. I've always said to my family that, you know, if I start losing it, just get me to the Humber Bridge and I'll deal with it. And I really thought that that's what I was going to do, and just take the leap into the unknown. I went to my GP, who suggested some NHS course of treatment. But that was appalling. There were 60 people in the room, with a young 22-year-old girl trying to read her script to us. There was a HR girl called Andrea, and she actually suggested grocery aid. And they suggested a course of therapy which involved having a chat on the phone for an hour a session. She'd sent me a book that was about mindfulness. I just started to get it. The techniques she taught me worked, and I was able to sleep at last. Costco were also very good. They suggested I go back in 1 day a week. The 1 day a week became 2 days a week, became 4 days a week. We've introduced a mental health walk where once a month we go out with other members of staff and just clear our heads and just have a chat. We need to be able to quieten our minds, and I thank Grocery Aid for giving me the ability to quieten my mind, because without it I don't know where I'd be now. If I can help just one person, then all of this would have been worthwhile.
Welcome back, everyone. It's great to have so many of you here and so many of you coming back for this final session, which I've been really looking forward to. Over the past few months, we've been working with some experts from outside our sector to try and give us perspective on what might happen as we go through the stages of the COVID crisis and then hopefully emerge to a post-COVID world. So we asked 3 organisations to produce reports about what was happening in different areas. So Rebecca Toby from the Food Foundation talking about the food system, Jonathan Reynolds from Oxford School of Retail Management talking about the wider retail sector, and Michaela Rode from Britain Thinks talking about consumer behaviour and lifestyles based on their Coronavirus Diaries project. So we're delighted to have them joining us here today. If you want to read their reports in full, go to the resource centre and the information is available there. But I'll introduce them in turn. Actually, when I go to introduce them, I'll ask each of them to maybe just give a 1 or 2 minute summary of what they said in their paper that we asked them to produce for us. So, Rebecca, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a bit about yourself and about the report.
Hi everybody, great to be here today. So I'm Rebecca, I'm a nutritionist but also a project manager at the Food Foundation. So we're a think tank and charity looking at food system issues. And specifically I lead on a project called Peas Please, which is all about working with businesses to increase access to vegetables. And what we did for our report is we built on what we've called our COVID tracker, which is sort of monitoring the impact that COVID-19 has been having on the food system throughout the duration of the pandemic. And essentially we looked at 3 main areas. So we looked at how COVID has impacted on the food businesses. And what we found is that there have definitely been winners and also sadly losers. So there are estimates that up to 20% of restaurants, for example, will have gone out of business by the end of the year. But then on the flip side, we've seen a huge growth in online shopping and sales. And also the convenience store sector has done very well, with sort of relative market share growing, I think, by about 60% between January and June as people sort of shifted back to shopping more locally, and there was a real shift towards more local food production. We also looked at how it's impacting on consumer behaviour, and actually this is probably the area where it's still a little hardest to draw conclusions, or at least we think. But certainly we frame this around the idea of a tale of 2 COVIDs, in that we've seen very different, I think, experiences according to people's socioeconomic status and so on and so forth. So on one hand, food insecurity has hugely increased, so by about 250% compared to pre-COVID levels. But then we've also had, some people have had more time, more opportunity to cook from scratch. We've seen an increase in sales of both fruit and veg and frozen foods, and sort of positive behaviours like reduction in food waste, but also an increase in sales of confectionery, snacks and alcohol. So some quite different things going on there. And finally, we looked at the macro environment, to where there is a bit of a patchy picture, but I think it's very much still emerging. So food prices have generally remained pretty much stable, but what we have seen is the disappearance of price promotions, which has led to a bit of inflation, and also I think questions remaining around the food supply, without even thinking about Brexit. Things such as, will the impact of COVID restrictions in the global south impact on our food supply as we enter the British winter time? And we concluded just by sort of looking at the risks and opportunities that all of this change offers the convenience store sector.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. Well worth looking at that report in the Resource Centre. Jonathan, tell us a bit about what you found looking at the broader retail industry.
Surely, James. Thanks, and great to be with you all. My background is as an academic. I've worked with retail sector for the last 30 years, and the last 6 months has been one of the most interesting and challenging, I think, of that whole 30 years. The report that I produced for ACS, again, is on the Resource Centre, and the brief was to look much more broadly at the retail sector than just food or convenience retail. And it was produced at the end of July, and what's been very interesting is such has been the pace of change that I'm a little anxious to sort of look back at it and say, well, actually, how many of these trends are actually being sustained, for example, just 6 weeks on. But I wanted to focus on a couple of themes that seem to be enduring, as well as different and quite distinctive. The first of these is something we've all, over the last few weeks particularly, come to understand, and that's some of the place type impacts on the retail sector of the pandemic. You know, compared to many other trends like the growth of online and so on, which is very much an acceleration, the effects on places and the sustainability of different types of places has been relatively unforeseen at any early stage in the pandemic. I think what my report tries to pull out is that really few of us had really anticipated that our biggest cities would be shadows of their former selves, you know, just a year on. Indeed, you know, thinking about a year ago, I was talking about the need to revitalize local high streets, and yet there we now see, you know, much revitalization going on, and independents in particular benefiting from some of that growth. What we've seen is what I call a sort of de-densification of demand. So we've seen a kind of spreading out of consumer demand across the country, away from the clusters that we found in big commuting locations and so on. The question is whether that'll be sustained or is it temporary. We know, you know, historic data that in times of plague, people flee cities. You know, will they return? Well, the evidence is they do. Will they return given that we have the internet? Who knows? The second theme I think is really interesting is, you know, the pace of adaptability and innovation in the sector. That's been really exciting to see. You know, whilst we've seen job losses and store closures amongst non-food retailers, and particularly clothing and food service businesses, my tracker talks about something like 50,000 jobs lost, you know, since the end of March in non-food retail and food service. That's pretty significant. You know, the benefits on the food retail side have been more positive. We've seen recruitment by people like Iceland, by Tesco, by others, as reflects very different experiences in different types of retail. But it's very clear that agility and innovation have been the hallmark of the winning firms. The redefinition of retail workforce as frontline workers has also helped, I think, with that grassroots response to day-to-day changes in customer needs. My final kind of theme in the report really is, you know, will we see as a result of that convenience retailing be redefined? You know, convenience is a thing that contributes to an easy and effortless way of life. And frankly, our lives have become, on the one hand, a lot more inconvenient over the past few months, lack of contact with friends and family, lack of access to leisure pursuits, cancelled holidays, and so on. In response to this, you know, perhaps we need to think about reinventing what we mean by convenience. You know, shopping locally has re-emphasized the value of physical proximity and convenience through technology or in regular contact with families and friends. We've replaced the inconvenience and discomfort of public transport with local patronage and so on. And so that led me to question right at the end. I'm sure we'll discuss this. What kind of convenience store businesses, actual or new, will succeed longer term in capturing consumers' attention in this new and fast evolving context, and how will they create and capture value? That was really the gist. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Jonathan. As always, a brilliant report, as always. Michaela, I was just fascinated to work with you guys with the Coronavirus Diaries project and that very novel approach to finding out how people were living during this time. There's so much information, so to get some cut through on that's really useful. Tell us what the picture was from consumers, from people, you know, from ordinary people. Let's call them people rather than consumers. People out in society and how they're behaving and what their attitudes are at this time.
Sure. So I'm Michaela. I'm from Britain Thinks. We're an insight and strategy consultancy. We've been running a project since early April called the Coronavirus Diaries. It's a qualitative tracker following 50 people around the country. We give them weekly tasks and then we write weekly reports in which we combine the insights from that qualitative tracker with the published polling. And we've touched on kind of many different themes as we go. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of points at this stage. One of which is something that Rebecca already mentioned, this idea of two COVIDs, of there being huge variation in terms of the impact that the crisis has had on people's lives, both in terms of how much change they've experienced as a result of the crisis and how well they feel they've been able to cope with that change. So some polling we did back in June found that 70% of people say that actually they've been coping quite well at this time. And certainly from our work, we can see, you know, there are a lot of positives people have taken away from this, both from a financial point of view, actually being able to save more because they're not going out and having a good time. And from a personal point of view, being able to spend more time with family, rediscovering a sense of community, a sense of connection with people in living in the same area as them. But then there are also a full 30% of people who say, I'm not coping well. And actually that's quite a strong statement to sign up to in a poll. So it speaks volumes for some of the difficulties that people are experiencing at this time. And clearly there's a mental health angle to that. There were a lot of difficulties people experiencing with a sense of isolation during the lockdown, and just the whole stress of the health risk. But there's also clearly a financial angle to that as well, with people's income having been severely affected at this time. And the groups that are most likely to have been affected financially are young people, women and low earners, all of whom over-index in sectors that have been most severely impacted. And just the other points I wanted to pick up on at this stage is the change in mood that we've seen since the start of the crisis. Back in March, there was a real sense of unity, both around the health risks and around what approach we should take to mitigate those health risks. There was a lot of support for lockdown. What we're seeing now is a lot more concern about the economic impact of the crisis, and a lot more division around what our approach should be to managing the health risks. So we've moved from a position of unity to actually increasing division.
Yeah, so certainly something we see come up with from your data over time. I'm very interested to see where some of those attitudes might sit as we go into the winter. I'm not going to focus on that though. The question I'm asked most, and the question that's come up a lot today actually in the rest of Summit, is which of these changes are going to be sustained? Which of these things are sort of, they're a blip, a very significant blip, they're a blip, and then we go back to how we were, and which of these changes will kick off a new trend, new wave of activity. So I'll start with you, Jonathan. Two questions really. How sustained do you think some of these changes are? And secondly, given all that, which of those would you advise retailers watching here to focus on in building their business plans? What would be the thing you think they'd be wise to focus on as a trend and a change coming out of this period of time?
Yeah, it's the question I always get asked as well about, which of these trends is actually going to keep with us. And of course, we generally don't know many cases. The one that is most obviously answerable is the online growth trend. We see a real shift across into online, both for food and for non-food. This has dropped slightly in the last couple of months, back from 32% to just under 30, I think, and might drop back a bit further. But it's clear that many new sort of enthusiasts for online shopping have been persuaded to go down this route. And so it really is significant for retailers to think about, if they haven't already, how they're going to accommodate that kind of shift. We also know how challenging that is. If you think about the fact that Ocado had a waiting list of 1 million people, for a service a little while ago, and how difficult many retailers have found it to scale up their activities online. But we also have a lot of intermediaries willing to help in this area. So that's one, I think. And the second is, I think, the trend that we'll need to endure, partly because of the volatility and uncertainty that we're going to continue to see, frankly, until we have addressed this problem with a vaccine, is going to be around adaptability and innovation and willingness to be creative, thinking on your feet on almost a day-to-day basis at the moment. I think we're all facing those kinds of challenges.
Something which should play into our sectors, and perhaps smaller, hyper-local, smaller stores, smaller businesses often. Rebecca, same question to you. Which is the trend we should be focusing on, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? What changes are going to last and which aren't? I mean, I think I definitely agree with that point about online being here to stay. And I think that's a real opportunity probably for the convenience store sector, is looking to boost online and delivery options. I think what's interesting is that the wider policy environment as well is sort of being impacted on by COVID. So I think certainly, health was already an increasing focus before COVID, but now we've had the obesity strategy, which was very much framed around COVID-19 and the fact that more severe outcomes are associated with a number of diet-related diseases. So I think there is an opportunity there for convenience stores to, many of whom I know are sort of already shifting towards grocery, to build on that. Certainly frozen foods and frozen fruit and vegetables was a real growth area during sort of lockdown, and actually seems to be sticking around, with even younger generations now having sort of become used to buying more frozen fruit and veg, sort of staying with those shopping habits. So I think certainly offering maybe more ingredients, more fruit and veg, is an opportunity area, and ties in with the sort of broader regulatory environment and direction of travel there.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. Great point, Rebecca. Michaela, same question to you. What's the trend we should be focused on most, do you think, in our sector?
I think one we haven't mentioned yet is home working, which does feel like something genuinely new. It's completely changed attitudes as to what is feasible, how well we can work remotely, and people have found a lot of positives to come from the experience. There's not many who would say they want to wholesale eliminate the office, but certainly moving towards having more of a balance in terms of time spent working in the office and time spent working at home. And obviously that just has so many implications for where people are at different times of the week, where they choose to shop, how they manage their various responsibilities with childcare and domestic duties and work. So that is something that seems set to be a long-term structural shift and will have implications for the sector.
And I'll just follow up with you, Michaela, on that. So implications for our sector, yes. Implications for the communities people live in, how people sort of manage their lives, their world, and how much of that is close by, how much is commute away, how much is with family. How are consumers seeing those those communities change?
Yeah, it's been, it was an enormous sense of community during lockdown, which was sort of one of the biggest positives people have coming out of this experience, is that sense of feeling connected to their neighbours in a way they haven't before, feeling a sense of solidarity with those around them, feeling a real appreciation for local businesses that have kind of kept them going through this time. And it's a rediscovery of what community can mean. It's not kind of a new idea, but it was something people didn't really realize was missing from their lives before, and now they've got a sense of how they can connect with it again, and really want that to continue in the future, and sort of looking for ways in which that feeling they had can be fostered even outside of the sort of strange experience of lockdown.
There's that feeling that, you know, we were here all along. The answer we were looking for was here all along, and it was our members. Obviously, I'm biased, but of course I'm going to say that. I'm looking for a closing comment from each of you and let you sort of expand this a little bit. One of the reasons we commissioned these projects and wanted to hear your insights is because you're probably people that people in our industry don't hear from all the time, people from outside of the sector. So tell us something that perhaps the people listening maybe won't have heard and picked up on. You know, looking to go home, people thinking, oh, I never knew that as a point. What's a perspective that maybe we've been shielded from that we ought to maybe think about? I'll start with you, Jonathan, then Rebecca and Michaela.
Okay, I think a really interesting idea that I came across middle of last year, actually, but has come into its own in times of COVID. I'm a geographer by background, so I really get into sort of places. You know, I really enjoy, and this is why it's been so frustrating the last few months, I'm going to go to places. But the idea of the 15-minute city, this is an idea that was developed by an academic a few years back. It's been picked up by a number of big city authorities, Paris, Milan, and so on, as part of their response to COVID, suggesting that actually you can create sustainable urban communities where you live, work, shop, take your leisure within 15 minutes of your home. And that kind of concept, I think, feeds in very much to, you know, Michaela's comment about community and the sustainability of that. And if we can kind of almost inject that into some of the regulatory and planning policy dimensions of change over the next few months and years, then I suspect that, you know, we will find a way of sustaining some of our larger cities and some of our suburban communities in ways that perhaps weren't possible before.
That's brilliant. I love the concept of the 15-minute city. Rebecca?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think maybe the one thing for me that I think always surprises people is I think there's often the opinion that, you know, the UK is fifth or sixth or whatever it is now, largest economy in the world. And so there's often quite a lot of surprise around the prevalence of food insecurity that does exist. And I think particularly, you know, given the likelihood of an economic recession, and obviously who knows what's going to happen once the furlough scheme ends end of October, I think we are in for a rocky ride, and certainly significant sections of the population are going to have a tough time. And so I think, you know, from a convenience store sector, I think, you know, you guys have a unique position in a lot of sometimes rural or quite isolated or just local communities. And I think there's a huge amount of value that you already add to those communities and could continue to do. So, you know, whether that's providing accepting Healthy Start vouchers or continuing to act as you are as that sort of often hubs within communities is going to be really valuable going forward.
Yeah, really important point, because I say that opportunity and that status that we have also brings a responsibility in terms of some of those issues, and we're the people placed to try to influence those issues, which is not easy. Michaela, I'm going to finish with you as a key key thing that maybe people won't be as familiar with, a trend or an issue.
Yeah, it's just what the public want to happen next. So there's a real appetite for change. A survey we did found only 6% want the economy to go back to the way it was before the crisis. People want to see something positive come out of this, whether that's more investment in public services or a more equal society, but there's that real appetite for change.
Yeah, really interesting, all those perspectives, and I don't disagree with any of that. Let's remind everyone, the reports that Rebecca, Michaela and Jonathan have written are on our resource centre. We also conducted much more in-depth webinar discussions with some of our senior members during August, and they're all held as well and recorded, so anyone can go back and look at those. Contact us if you want a link to those. But second last thing I want to do is thank Jonathan, Michaela and Rebecca. Fantastic contributions and fantastic reports. Again, I really commend to everyone. And the final thing really is for me to hand over to our chair, Debbie Robinson, who's going to close off Summit with some thoughts of her own and some comments. And I'm sure she'll say as well, but I'm going to make sure we don't forget to say as well, do continue to take part in Summit after her presentation. After the presentation's finished, we have a networking lounge, a sponsors lounge. So do take part in that. And hearing reports is all going extremely well. Everyone's spending a lot of time together getting to know each other. So looking forward to seeing you all in those. But the last thing from me is to hand over to the chair of ACS, Debbie Robinson.
Hello there, everyone, and thank you all for attending the ACS Summit 2020. I'd like to thank our sponsors. You know, without you, these things really can't move forward. I'd like to thank all the presenters. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I think has been a real reflection of the work that the ACS has been doing during the most difficult of circumstances. And that's actually been innovative, it's being creative and very much adapting to the situation that we find ourselves in. This is a big year for the ACS, of course, with lots of celebrations planned for the 25th anniversary. But in the absence of celebration, I think the association has really proved its value in representing its membership and influencing government to make sure that the vital role that all of you have played during a global pandemic is recognised, is appreciated, and really very much is part of the solution, not just now, but very much into the future. I would like to thank Paul and Sarah for the work that they have done, working with all of our partners, and indeed, not least of which, for pulling off something like today. And as chair, I've had a real opportunity just to see the amount of dedication, the standards and professionalism within the association, but also within the membership. And I feel that the ACS has really delivered professional, concise advice that really has been adopted by so many of the members. And this is crucial as we move forward. So some of the presentations that you've heard today, some really new themes, some real developments on existing themes, and certainly the 15-minute livable community is something that I have heavily subscribed to and really do see as a big opportunity for us moving forward. It's crucial that all the goods and services that are required, particularly many people in our society, are continuing to shield and will continue to do so for some time. So finding new and innovative ways to reach them will be absolutely crucial. I'd like to thank the board as well, because what you won't know is in the background, the board has been meeting weekly during the height of the current crisis, but then more recently fortnightly. And they've also been participating in a number of working groups. And this is really looking at how the association adapts to the changing environment and indeed actually starts to really grow and introduce new products and services that will reach even more of our membership and of course make us even more attractive to new members. You know, I'm delighted to say that despite the challenges that we've all experienced, that the association continues to grow and attract new members. So to the new members that have joined us today, you know, thank you. And also to existing members, your contributions are really valued and important and help shape your association going forward. Something that's really stood out for me, and I think has come through in some of the presentations today, is our colleagues in store and the appreciation and I think the status that they now have in society. And what we must do is continue to protect them, and the ACS will continue to campaign for tougher sentencing to make sure that we do protect all of those individuals, frontline colleagues in each of our businesses. I'd like also on that point just to not miss the opportunity to recognise a really special individual, and that's Raj Agrawal. He has been a real committed contributor to the ACS and indeed to the wider community. We lost him to COVID-19 following literally a mercy visit to hospital where he was giving out goods to patients. But we are looking at ways that we will recognise Raj in the future, and I'm sure there are many others that we may have lost. But actually, as with the future, there are some real challenges ahead. We're getting used to living with COVID-19. There is a distinct possibility that we will not reach a deal with Europe. There are issues around obesity that again have been picked up on Summit, are coming to the fore once again, as well as civil unrest, high unemployment, and of course, likely recession. But what I do know is that the association is in an incredibly strong place. It's recruited new young members to the team. So we've got this perfect blend of youth and experience. And I feel so confident that the association will take the whole of the sector forward. And I would say to suppliers, thank you for the support that you have given. And please pick up on these keywords about innovation and the fact that shoppers' habits have changed. They are shopping and spending much more in their community and convenience stores. So please make sure that the offer is fresh and exciting and that your new products go there first, because that's where your customers are going to see them first. So despite all of that is around us, I just want to really end in a very positive note, because I truly believe that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to build healthier, sustainable society for all into the future. I thank you all for attending. I'll just echo the fact that the sponsor area and the networking areas are available. So, you know, please participate. A key part of the ACS family is that networking, is the sharing of your ideas and experience to strengthen this wonderful sector. And thank you to you all.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
At this store in Cambridgeshire, it's a race to keep shelves stocked. Sales are up 75%.
Use your common sense. We do serve a lot of elderly and vulnerable people.
Mum and Dad have been serving this community for 3 decades. Their sons have been picking orders for vulnerable customers who can't leave their homes.
Our staff are our number one asset, and we need to try and protect them
as much as we possibly can, because whilst it's a different front line, they are on the front line. We're having 20,000 people a week go through our shop at the present time, and my staff are there serving them and looking after them.
Just this incredible spirit of togetherness in terms of customers in stores, and I would say a real turning point of that was lockdown.
It was then that people started to move across and look at other sources of supply, and that very much included the convenience store sector.
We were having to fill that gap in many respects through local sourcing because there were issues with the national supply chains. And that was quite useful, and that really opened our eyes to some of the local producers that perhaps we hadn't worked with before.
And we've heard a lot about the supermarkets, but should not overlook the essential role of local shops, providing an estimated 600,000 home deliveries per week.
More and more they're using us instead of the supermarket. Things like our meat sales, we've seen an 800% increase in that. We do a free home delivery, or we've been doing a call and collect where people can book their shopping, and then when they get to us, ring us, and we literally go out to the curb with their shopping.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
No.
Generally, retailers are just trying to make their stores as welcoming, as inviting a place as possible.
There's lots of signage on the floors and directional arrows indicating social distance, and we've had to make the till areas very secure and safe with screens and again directional arrows to try to get people to go through.
Local shops operate at the heart of our communities and across every type of location: villages, housing estates, petrol forecourts and high streets.
And I just want to put the message out there that everyone should use their local convenience stores going forward, so that these great shops and these great businesses continue to thrive and serve our community.